Donald Trump, the man so desperate to let all of us know that he wasn't under investigation, found himself under investigation. Because it was the firing of James Comey that led to the appointment of special counsel Robert Mueller. And that's when President Trump's crimes began.
I am so damn tired of being lied to. I don't think I can deny it anymore. You can stick to your story if you think it flies, but I'm not gonna buy it anymore.
Hello, and thank you for listening to the 196th episode of the listener-supported ad-free podcast Congressional Dish. I'm your host, Jennifer Briney. If this is your first time listening to this podcast, you picked an episode that isn't a typical Congressional Dish episode. Actually, if I'm telling the truth, I'm still trying to define what a typical episode of this podcast is, but I know that an episode focused on President Donald Trump is certainly not it. Because I started this podcast in 2012 as a taxpayer frustrated by the fact that the branch of the federal government that's meant to most directly represent me, Congress, was the branch that I knew the least about. And so I set out to change that and decided to bring others along for the ride, assuming that there were others who gave a shit. And it turns out that there are. There are a lot of people in this country who want to know what's being done by our representatives with our money and in our names. And that's really the heart of my mission here. I just want to understand better what's happening in our branch of government and what our role is in the world. And I want to understand these things using facts. And so the most important thing that I do, which I've done since the beginning of this podcast, is I give you all of my sources on congressionaldish.com. Because I'm just some person. So I have to earn your trust. And so to do that, I need to prove to you that I'm not full of shit. Giving you my sources, despite the many extra hours that it takes to put together, is the only way I can think of to earn your trust. So please know that those are available for you for this and every episode, and I welcome any notifications if there is something missing. I want us to learn together using this podcast. I'm not doing this to look for any political fights, because I don't find political fighting fun or even productive in any way. And for this episode, my mission forced me to read the entire Mueller report because this is going to be a major focus of our Congress for the foreseeable future, for at least the next year and a half. And so I want to know what the actual facts are so that I can spot who is trustworthy and who is full of shit when they talk about it. And so this episode is for you, obviously, but it's also for me. And the purpose is to lay out what the Mueller report says happened, both in the 2016 election and in the years that have passed since, in order to set my own narrative to go by, based 100% on the report itself and with almost no outside influence. Because longtime listeners know that I have avoided the Russiagate stories like the plague. There was so much guessing and provable bullshit being peddled that the whole thing just felt like some kind of show. You know, a show that I wasn't interested in watching because there was going to be a report at the end of it, which gave us everything we needed to know with no guessing all at once. Because I'm a millennial and I binge things. And so the Mueller report was my way of binging the entire Trump-Russia show. And honestly, this thing was 448 pages, but it was one of the easiest homework assignments I've ever given myself because once I opened it, I didn't want to put it down. It was quite the fascinating script. And then when reading the report, I purposely avoided all news about it so that I could form my own thoughts about what I saw, and so that I could determine for myself what should be highlighted for future reference. I printed out the entire Mueller report, which the FedEx Kinko's guy found hilarious, and I brought it with me on my recent trip to Cabo San Lucas, where 13 of my closest friends can testify that I locked up my phone in my room and I spent no time on the internet. Since coming home, I've been obsessively going through the footnotes of the Mueller report to find the relevant hearings and interviews and everything I needed to make this episode. The only things I've watched on television since coming back from Mexico have been basketball playoffs and Veep. And, of course, an obscene amount of old hearings and Trump footage in order to put this thing together. But the reason I'm telling you this is that this is one of those topics that gets people all crazy like, you know, I'm still emotionally scarred by 2017 and the quite frankly mean reactions that were hurled my way for daring to say things that didn't fit the anti-Trump narrative at that time. I've avoided discussing Trump at all ever since, mainly because it's not what my show is about, but also because this is one of those topics that scares me. I hate talking about the current topic of the corporate media show, because there's always one storyline that everyone thinks they're an expert on. And so there is always a small group of people who feel entitled to label my thoughts when I talk about it and call me names when I don't match their political side, or if I choose not to highlight information that they would have wanted highlighted. And I know that that's not most people, but I guess I just feel the need to say upfront that I'm not going to tolerate it this time. Mean people will be blocked on social media and ignored in my email inbox. I'm not here to fight with anyone. You have to be nice to me. I'm on everyone and no one side. All I am is an American taxpayer. That is the only label that I embrace. And so any opinions that I opt to share with you today will be based on the report. And honestly, I'm going to try and keep my opinions to a minimum because the stories here are fascinating by themselves. So fascinating, in fact, that I'm going to do a follow-up episode, which I'll release by the end of May, with information about the fallout from the Mueller report's release, specifically the Attorney General being held in contempt of Congress over it, because that vote happened the day I got back from Mexico, and I really have no idea what went down, and I definitely want to know after reading the report. And on top of that, I'm going to tell you about some of the other rabbit holes that the Mueller report exposed, especially related to Ukraine of all places. The replacement of Ukraine's government in 2014 is a topic that I have discussed repeatedly since it happened, and I was surprised to learn more about that in the Mueller report. And so that's all I'm going to say about that now, because I could definitely go on. But this episode is about the Mueller report itself. This episode is my summary of the important stuff, the stuff I think it's important for me to remember. And I intend to use this episode as my own frame of reference going forward to help myself stay focused on what matters. And so let's stop screwing around and get to it, because there's a lot to talk about. For those of you who have been living in some kind of cave with no internet access for the last 3 years, the Mueller report is the final product of a 2-part investigation that was conducted by former FBI Director Robert Mueller. The first part of the investigation examined whether or not members of President Donald Trump's campaign conspired with members of the Russian government to steal and release emails belonging to Democratic Party insiders during the 2016 election. And the final answer, which I'm sure everyone who gives a damn already knows by now, was, quoting from the Mueller report, quote, "The investigation did not establish the members of the Trump campaign conspired or coordinated with the Russian government in its election interference activities," unquote. So that's pretty clear. They didn't do it. And so no wonder the existence of this investigation made President Trump so insane. He really was innocent until he wasn't. Because Donald Trump's childish reaction to the existence of the Mueller investigation is what led him to commit the crime of obstruction of justice, which he definitely did. The Mueller report proved it to me. But the reason Donald Trump isn't under indictment for obstruction of justice is because he's the current sitting president of the United States. The Mueller team decided that they couldn't reach a conclusion on the crime he's guilty of, obstruction of justice, because the current president of the United States can't be indicted. And because he can't be indicted, he can't get a fair trial in the traditional courts. However, he can get a trial in the Senate. And so that's the jurisdiction, Congress, that the Mueller report turns this process over to. That is why we need to know what's in the Mueller report. So basically, the Mueller investigators did not clear President Trump of obstruction of justice the way they cleared him of conspiring with the Russian government. In fact, the Mueller report says, quote, "If we had confidence after a thorough investigation of the facts that the president clearly did not commit obstruction of justice, we would so state. Based on the facts and the applicable legal standards, however, we are unable to reach that judgment," unquote. So in summary, Donald Trump is innocent on Trump Russia, but pretty clearly guilty of the cover-up. The end. Just kidding. We're only just getting started. But I figured, why bury the lead? I'm sure you've already heard all of that by now. Maybe not put that bluntly, but everyone seems to know those basic facts. But now let's get into the details of what did happen. And we'll start with the big show, the Russia part of the investigation. Now let's flash back for a second to the end of 2015, right before the start of election season. At that time, the Obama administration was actively attempting to overthrow the government of Syria. They were trying to overthrow Syria's president, Bashar al-Assad. Here's a mashup of the testimony provided to Congress in November 2015, so right before election season, by Ann Patterson, then Obama's Assistant Secretary of State for Near East Policy.
Let me stress that is our goal, to get Assad out, and that the goal is to remove Bashar al-Assad and his closest advisors and have this political process that would lead to a new government. The presidents and certainly the secretary have said many times that Assad's departure is absolutely critical to any future in Syria. The idea is to have a transitional government, to work on a timetable for Assad's departure, and let me be clear that that's a critical element of this policy, and then to work on constitutional review and ultimately an election in Syria. That's the basic outlines of Secretary Kerry's strategy.
But 3.5 years later, President Assad is still in power in Syria. And the reason is Russia. Russia used their military to defend Assad's government from the United States and our partners in war. Here's Representative Gerald Connolly of Virginia questioning regime change empress Victoria Nuland, who at the time was the Obama administration's Assistant Secretary of State for European and Eurasian Affairs in that same hearing in November 2015.
What in the world makes us think Russia would agree to that? Well, why would Russia agree to a transitional government with opposition figures and the removal of Assad? And did you get that commitment?
Congressman, Russia did agree to that general framework in 2012 when it signed on to the original.
Well, that's before they started bombing and military activities on the ground. It's now 2015. You had a meeting in Vienna. Did the Russians agree?
So as Assistant Secretary Patterson has said, they have agreed to the general framework that we need a ceasefire, we need a transitional government, we need elections. The area of dispute is at what stage in that process Assad departs the scene.
Well, I must say, my time's up, but given what's happening on the ground, that sounds like fantasy to me.
So the Obama administration wanted to replace the president of Syria, and the Russians were getting in the way. The Russians in 2015 were using their military at the request of the Syrian government to defend the Syrian government from the United States at a time when the United States, as you just heard, was publicly declaring our intention to overthrow the government of Syria. On the ground and over the skies of Syria in late 2015 were the United States and the Russian militaries. The scene was set for a proxy war. 2 weeks after this hearing, on November 19th, 2015, already a presidential candidate, Hillary Clinton, gave an address on C-SPAN, on public television around the world, to the Council on Foreign Relations, which is a global organization where regime changers plot their world domination. Except I'm not kidding, that's actually what they do. And this is what Hillary Clinton told the world was her plan for Syria as president of the United States. I have not edited this.
So we need to move simultaneously toward a political solution to the civil war that paves the way for a new government with new leadership and to encourage more Syrians to take on ISIS as well. To support them, we should immediately deploy the Special Operations Force President Obama has already authorized and be prepared to deploy more as more Syrians get into the fight. And we should retool and ramp up our efforts to support and equip viable Syrian opposition units. Our increased support should go hand in hand with increased support from our Arab and European partners, including special forces who can contribute to the fight on the ground. We should also work with the coalition and the neighbors to impose no-fly zones that will stop Assad from slaughtering civilians and the opposition from the air.
So presidential candidate Hillary Clinton wanted a
new government with new leadership
in Syria. To get that new government,
we should immediately deploy the Special Operations Force President Obama has already authorized and be prepared to deploy more.
And she intended
to impose no-fly zones.
No-fly zones. Well, Syria was the zone. And so if she were president, she wanted to stop planes from flying over Syria. And how do you enforce that with your military? Well, you shoot down the planes that fly over Syria. And whose military was flying planes over Syria? Russia. And so imposed no-fly zones was a lizard person way of threatening Russia militarily and very obviously to those up on the lingo. Just 4 months after she gave this speech to the warmongers of the world, by mid-March, Hillary Clinton had racked up a substantial lead in the Democratic Party primaries. She was ahead by hundreds of real delegates. And that's when the Russians began their internet-based attempts to prevent a Hillary Clinton presidency. I can see a very clear, reasonable motive for the Russian government to want to prevent a Hillary Clinton presidency, regardless of who the other nominee was. Although the other nominee was this guy.
With her, you'll end up in World War III. She doesn't know what she's doing. So you're not fighting Syria anymore. You're fighting Syria, Russia, and Iran. What we should do is focus on ISIS. We should not be focusing on Syria.
And so I can clearly see why Russia would find it in their best interest at that time to try to steer the outcome of the 2016 election in a way that they could make sure that Hillary Clinton would not become the most powerful person in the world. And I can also see why they would consider Donald Trump to be a better option for them. And so here's what the Russian government did, or I should say the main intelligence directorate of the General Staff of the Russian Army, the GRU, which is a part of the Russian government. Here's what they did. Starting in March 2016, the GRU used some disturbingly simple hacking methods to access computers belonging to members of the Democratic Party. The Russian intelligence officers then stole the Democrats' emails and released them to the public. Those emails exposed some very real corruption inside of the Democratic Party. For example, those documents led to the general public learning that the Democratic Party was administering an unfair primary favoring Hillary Clinton over the other candidates. Unfair to the point that Hillary controlled the party's money. And that's information which may have hurt her in the election. I know it didn't make me trust her any more than the not at all level I trusted her before. But that document released to the public is what has been branded as election interference. As far as the success of the Russian efforts, the public's reaction to the truths exposed by those email dumps probably did affect the election in some way. But here's my confession. I personally love that we were given that information. I want to know if one of the two largest political parties in my country is rigging the process for picking one of the top two options that we get for president. And I quite frankly can't bring myself to really give a shit who gave us those emails. That's information we needed before the election, because before the election is when we're making our important decisions. We should always demand that before an election, if the choice is between giving the public information and not giving the public information, the right thing to do always is to give the public the information about the candidates and parties. The jobs that presidential candidates are asking us to trust them with are unique because we are giving these people very real power over us. Those jobs demand trustworthiness, and so we have a right to know. And so, yeah, it appears the Russians did it. They stole and released the Democrats' emails. And no, I still don't care. What I care deeply about, however, are the Russian attempts, especially the successful attempts, to access our election administration systems. That's a big fucking deal, and it reveals some fixable problems with our election administration systems that we have the ability and time to fix before November 2020. Specifically, the Mueller report says that the Russian intelligence officers tried to access the digital systems of state boards of elections, Secretary of State and county governments, and the personal systems of people who worked for those agencies. They also targeted the private companies that sell our government voter registration software and voting machines. And in a few cases, their efforts worked. In June 2016, the Russian intelligence officers successfully accessed the computer network of the Illinois State Board of Elections. They then downloaded data, quote, related to thousands of U.S. voters, unquote, before they were discovered and kicked off the network. The report also says that the Russian intelligence officers were able to access, quote, the network of at least one Florida county government, unquote. They said the FBI is investigating the details. But this is the stuff that cannot be allowed to happen. We can't allow anyone to have the access to digitally remove voters from registration rolls, which would deny those people that were on the rolls their right to vote on election day. We also certainly can't allow anyone to digitally change our votes. And the solution to both of those now exposed problems is so easy. First of all, paper ballots. They should be required nationwide. We shouldn't allow any more up to the states bullshit in the digital age on the issue of ballots. We need to be able to do manual recounts if the digital machines are hackable, which they are. And that requires some kind of paper backup. It should be mandatory. As of the midterm elections we just had, there are 5 states, Delaware, Georgia, Louisiana, New Jersey, and South Carolina, that have no paper backup systems anywhere in their states. There are also 9 more states that in some of their districts don't have paper backups. These 9 states are Arkansas, Florida, Indiana, Kansas, Kentucky, Mississippi, Pennsylvania, Tennessee, and Texas. That means that 14 states, 28% of the states in this country, have districts without paper backups. That cannot be allowed to continue. And as for registration issues, we can also mandate that all states allow same-day voter registration. That way, if the Russians or the Republicans or anyone else deletes a bunch of names from the voter rolls, you can still show up and vote and have your vote counted. And you should know that both of these ideas were included in H.R. 1, that bill that I love that the Democrats have already abandoned. Those are two pieces of legislation that are already written and should be pursued in this Congress as quickly as possible. This is an achievable goal, if we demand it. But as far as the election interference goes, that's about it. We got lucky that they didn't access more. But something else that has been branded as election interference, and it was addressed by the Mueller report, is the troll farm. And I've talked about this many times on the show, but basically what we found out is that a Russian rich dude, not the Russian government, a Russian rich dude hired a bunch of people to work for his company called the Internet Research Agency, and they posted stuff on the internet. And to make it crystal clear, the Trump administration had absolutely nothing to do with this. The Mueller report says, quote, the investigation did not identify evidence that any U.S. person conspired or coordinated with the IRA, unquote. And right now, there is no proof or evidence, really, that the Russian government had anything to do with it either. And in the grand scheme of things, the effect of this private troll farm effort to, I don't even know, post stuff on the internet wasn't very big or very effective in changing the outcome of our election, if that was even the goal. So first of all, check out this conversation between Senator Roy Blunt of Missouri and Colin Stretch, a Facebook lawyer who testified to Congress in November of 2017.
Mr. Stretch, how much money did the Russians spend on ads that we now look back as either disruptive or politically intended? Is that $100,000? Is that
approximately $100,000?
I meant from your company.
Yes, approximately $100,000.
How much of that did they pay before the election? I've seen the number 44,000. Is that right? 56 after, 44 before.
The ad impressions ran 46% before the election. The remainder after the election.
46%. Well, if I had a consultant that was trying to impact an election and spent only 46% of the money before Election Day, I'd be pretty upset about that, I think. But so they spent $46,000. How much did the Clinton and Trump campaign spend on Facebook during? I assume before the election. Before the election, they were better organized than the other group.
Combined, approximately $81 million.
$81 million, and before the election.
Yes.
So 81 million, I'm not a great mathematician, but 46,000, 81 million, would that be like 1/1000 of 1%? It's something like that.
It's a small number by comparison, sir.
But we were told for years that these social media posts created by the Russians, who were actually not a part of the Russian government, amounted to an attack on our election. The posts interfered, dun dun dun, in our election in some way. Be afraid. And so keeping in mind that that is the message that has been beaten into our heads with repetition these last 2 years, this nugget of information from the Mueller report is a bit of a smack in the face. The Mueller report quotes a study printed in the Columbia Journalism Review that concluded that, quote, the bulk of IRA embeds in our study occurred after, not during the election. In fact, only 5% of the stories with IRA embeds were about the election. Instead, most of the satires covered hot-button social and political issues such as racism and healthcare. IRA accounts typically made their way into articles when news outlets wanted to illustrate current opinion by quoting tweets, unquote. The study also found that, quote, only a small fraction, 6% of the articles contained IRA-linked tweets with empirically false claims or fake news. Instead, real stories were used to stoke outrage, unquote. The Mueller report also confirmed that the IRA troll farm was able to get some American dummies to show up at some rallies that they organized. But I think an important thing I learned here is that they tried to organize rallies before and after the election. This wasn't a purely elect Trump thing. And as far as attendance is concerned, the report said it varied. It said some rallies appeared to have drawn few, if any, participants, while others drew hundreds, which that's not that big of a deal. And none of that got Trump elected because clearly, considering only 5% of their posts had anything to do with the election, that wasn't even the goal. But the Mueller report does make it clear that we have an in-house problem here in the United States when it comes to corporate journalists and what they use as sources. Because the Mueller report cites a study done by the University of Wisconsin-Madison that looked at 33 major American news outlets and checked their sources for tweets from the 100 most retweeted accounts that have been identified as being from the rich Russian dude's company, the IRA. And they found that at least one tweet from the IRA troll farm accounts were used as sources by 32 out of 33 major media outlets. The only major corporate outlet that didn't have any Russian troll farm tweets as sources was Vice Media. Well done, Vice. The media outlets that used the IRA tweets the most were HuffPost, the Daily Caller, and The Blaze. And so the worst offenders were so-called news organizations that preached to either a blue or red choir. And the Mueller report tells us that they used the troll farm tweets to preach to those choirs, using the tweets as either evidence that they had political support from who they thought were random American people, or they used the tweets as examples to mock people that they thought were random Americans. Either way, that's not journalism. That's what goes on in high school during lunch. That's gossip. So once again, the problem is not the Russians. It's something that is going on here at home. In many cases, our media outlets have replaced journalists with political operatives. And it's clearly important for us to support the organizations that know the difference. And so that's what Russia did. But what did the Trump campaign do? Did the Trump campaign do anything improper with Russians during the campaign? Kind of. First, in June 2016, Trump's dumbass kid, Donald Trump Jr., and his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, joined by the campaign manager, Paul Manafort, took a meeting with some Russians who told Trump Jr. that they had some dirt on Hillary Clinton that they wanted to deliver in person. The meeting happened, but the Russians didn't have anything on Clinton. The problem with this meeting is that it's illegal to accept contributions and donations from foreigners. Although, as we know, this is so easy to get around with 501c4s and their secret donations and their wink-wink disconnection with the campaigns they support. You know, the loopholes in this area of campaign finance are enormous. But regardless, it is illegal to take foreign campaign contributions, and valuable secret opposition research can qualify as a campaign contribution. But the Mueller report found this much-hyped meeting to be a nothing burger because it would be hard to argue that the Trumps got anything of value from taking this meeting, considering they got nothing out of it. And the report basically said that they would have had to have taken the meeting knowing that they were possibly going to break the law. But Trump Jr. and friends were too fucking stupid, and so the Mueller investigators couldn't prove that they knew that they were going to break the law if successful. And now it's time for one of my favorite sound clips from the testimony of Trump's former fixer, Michael Cohen.
Mr. Trump had frequently told me and others that his son, Don Jr., had the worst judgment of anyone in the world.
So there you go. Another thing that someone on Team Trump did that smelled fishy was when Paul Manafort, Trump's campaign manager, gave a Russian business partner of his polling data. And we don't know what the Russian guy did with that or why he would want it. But what mattered to me is that Manafort was meeting with his Russian businessman friend to discuss a peace plan for Ukraine, which was, quote, a backdoor way for Russia to control part of eastern Ukraine. Both men believed the plan would require candidate Trump's assent to succeed, unquote. And this blew my mind because, and I'll keep this super short for now, but we already talked about Syria and how the U.S. and the Russians were in a simmering and heating up proxy war in Syria in 2015. Well, that came after the United States, Vice President Joe Biden in particular, midwifed a change in government in Ukraine. That happened in 2014. And the government that we shuffled towards the door in Ukraine was the one that chose to partner economically with the Russians, when we were expecting the Ukrainian government to partner with the Europeans and enter the World Trade System. The Ukrainian president who did that last-minute head fake, who partnered economically with Russia unexpectedly and then got thrown out on his ass by our government and friends, was Viktor Yanukovych. And Paul Manafort was, quote, a close and trusted political advisor to Yanukovych during his time as president of Ukraine, unquote, right up until the time when the Obama administration got Yanukovych thrown out on his ass. Oh my God! And Paul Manafort is currently in prison because of things he did related to his work for Ukraine. Yanukovych in particular. His charges go back to the W. Bush years, and they had fuck all to do with Donald Trump. And I don't know this story yet, but by the end of this month, I will. And so will you. Because the Mueller report says that the reason that Manafort was working with that Russian businessman was to work out a plan on behalf of the former president Yanukovych, where Yanukovych would control the Russian side of Ukraine and our puppet government, or whatever government's ruling there now, I completely lost track. But that government would control the Europe side. And now Manafort's ass is in prison. And that's all I know. And this isn't the only time that Ukraine came up in my research here. So all I'm saying right now is stay tuned. In the next episode, I will tell you whatever I find out. I can't wait to go down this rabbit hole. But back to the Mueller report. That brings me to, finally, the one thing that the Trump administration did that was completely inappropriate in relationship to Russia, which was when Michael Flynn, Trump's pick to be his national security advisor, interfered with the Obama administration's foreign policy before President Trump took office. What happened is that during the lame duck session, which is the time between the election and the inauguration when people we have just fired get to keep their jobs, well, the outgoing Obama administration declared economic war on Russia. Obama enacted sanctions as a response to the Russian government stealing and releasing the Democrats' emails. After Obama enacted sanctions, Michael Flynn, who would soon be the national security advisor, but wasn't yet, he called the Russian ambassador and asked him not to respond in an escalation type way to Obama's sanctions. And the Russian government did what Flynn asked and credited Michael Flynn. Michael Flynn knew because he told Mueller investigators that his actions could be perceived as getting in the way of Obama's foreign policy. This is important because the Logan Act makes it a crime for unauthorized people to negotiate with foreign governments that are having a dispute with the United States. And Michael Flynn was not a part of the Obama administration and was not authorized to negotiate on behalf of the United States. And then when asked about it, Flynn lied. They said that. Those are the Mueller report's words. They said, quote, Flynn lied, unquote, to incoming administration officials by saying he had not discussed sanctions on his calls with the Russian ambassador. Here's Vice President-elect Mike Pence speaking to John Dickerson on Face the Nation just a few days before Trump and Pence took office.
It was reported by David Ignatius that the incoming National Security Advisor, Michael Flynn, was in touch with the Russian ambassador on the day the United States government announced sanctions for Russian interference with the election. Did that contact help with that Russian kind of moderate response to it, that there was no counter-reaction from Russia? Did the Flynn conversation help pave the way for that sort of more temperate Russian response?
I talked to General Flynn about that conversation. It actually was initiated when on Christmas Day he had sent a text to the Russian ambassador to express not only Christmas wishes but sympathy for the loss of life in the airplane crash that took place. It was strictly coincidental that they had a conversation. They did not discuss anything having to do with the United States decision to expel diplomats or impose a censure against Russia.
So Flynn denied what he did to the vice president and others in the administration who repeated what they were told on television, as you just heard. Flynn also told the same lies to the FBI. He was convicted in court later for these lies that he told to the FBI. But the Justice Department somehow knew in January 2017 that Flynn was lying. And 6 days after the inauguration, after seeing Mike Pence and other people on television repeat Flynn's lies, the Department of Justice told the White House about Michael Flynn's sanctions discussions. And I'm going to pause this story here for now. I will come back to it. But when it comes to the Trump administration and their conduct with the Russians, this was Trump's national security advisor interfering with the Obama administration's foreign policy while President Obama was still in charge of the country. That's wrong. But at the same time, yeah, I get it. Trump and Flynn were going to be in charge of our foreign policy in a month. So what's the point of watching an economic war expand knowing you will be in charge of that economic war in 3 weeks? What this exhibits to me, once again, is that the lame duck is stupid. It's so strange that we allow this gap period when people who have been fired or retired still get to keep their power. It seems to me like there should be some kind of transition period where the new administration plays some kind of role for precisely this reason. Why should an outgoing administration be allowed to start a fight that the next administration has no intention of waging? I don't know what we do about that. I guess I'm just pissing into the breeze on this one. But I get why Flynn did what he did. It makes sense to me. even if it was illegal. But for what it's worth, as far as, Trump, did he know about Flynn making those calls to the Russian ambassador during the Obama administration's final days? Well, the Mueller report says, quote, some evidence suggests that the president knew about the existence and content of Flynn's calls when they occurred, but the evidence is inconclusive and could not be relied upon to establish the president's knowledge, unquote. And so legally, that's a no. So in reality, the Trump administration did not conspire with the Russian government to obtain or release Democratic Party emails or post things on the internet or do any other nefarious thing. It never happened. But the story, the idea that this did happen, that the Trump campaign was somehow responsible for the release of those emails and had somehow partnered with Russia, was everywhere. Even I couldn't avoid it, and you know that I tried. And sometime in those chaotic days, the FBI launched an investigation into those claims. And the existence of that investigation ended up breaking Trump's brain, and he ended up committing crimes in order to shut down an investigation into a crime he didn't actually commit. So, you ready for the part of the Mueller report that tells us Donald Trump's crimes? Well, here comes the fun part, kids. So, now let's get back to that Mike Flynn story. So, where we were was that Michael Flynn undermined the Obama administration's foreign policy when he made unauthorized calls to the Russian ambassador, successfully requesting that the Russians not respond to Obama's sanctions. He then lied about those calls to the vice president and other Trump administration officials, and he lied to the FBI. And on January 26, 2017, within a week of President Trump taking office, the Department of Justice told President Trump about Flynn's lies. And the next day, President Trump arranged for a private dinner with FBI Director James Comey. Here's Senator James Risch of Idaho in a hearing with James Comey discussing notes that Comey took during that meeting about what happened.
You put this in quotes. Words matter. You wrote down the words so we can all have the words in front of us now. There's 28 words there that are in quotes, and it says, quote, I hope, this is the president speaking, I hope you can see your way clear to letting this go, to letting Flynn go. He is a good guy. I hope you can let this go. Now, those are his exact words. Is that correct?
Correct.
And you wrote them here and you put them in quotes?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you for that. He did not direct you to let it go.
Not in his words, no.
He did not order you to let it go.
Again, those words are not an order.
No. He said, I hope. Now, like me, you probably did hundreds of cases, maybe thousands of cases, charging people with criminal offenses. And of course, you have knowledge of the thousands of cases out there that where people have been charged. Do you know of any case where a person has been charged for obstruction of justice, or for that matter, any other criminal offense, where they said or thought they hoped for an outcome?
I don't know well enough to answer. And the reason I keep saying his words is I took it as a direction.
Right.
I mean, this is the President of the United States with me alone saying, I hope this. I took it as this is what he wants me to do. Now, I didn't obey that, but that's the way I took it.
And later in the hearing, Comey expanded on that.
I think there's a big difference in kicking superior officers out of the Oval Office, looking the FBI director in the eye and saying, I hope you let this go. I think if the agents, as good as they are, heard the President of the United States did that, there's a real risk of a chilling effect on their work.
And in fact, had James Comey been a different person, it might have had a chilling effect on the FBI's investigation into Russia's efforts to prevent a crooked Hillary presidency, which by then had already been launched. Here's Senator Jack Reed of Rhode Island talking to Comey in that hearing.
You interpret the discussion with the president about Flynn as a direction to stop the investigation. Is that correct?
Yes.
And then, of course, after the fact, Trump publicly lied about it. Here's Senator Angus King of Maine questioning James Comey.
And at his press conference on May 18th, the president was asked whether he had urged you to shut down the investigation into Michael Flynn. The president responded, quote, no. Next question. Is that an accurate statement?
I don't believe it is.
And so this is the conclusion of the Mueller report. Quote, the circumstances of the conversation show that the president was asking Comey to close the FBI's investigation into Flynn. First, the president arranged the meeting with Comey so that he would be alone and purposely excluded the attorney general, which suggests that the president meant to make a request to Comey that he did not want anyone else to hear. Second, because the president is the head of the executive branch, when he says he hopes a subordinate will do something, it is reasonable to expect the subordinate will do what the president wants, unquote. It also says, quote, evidence does establish that the president connected the Flynn investigation to the FBI's broader Russia investigation and that he believed, as he told Chris Christie, that terminating Flynn would, quote, end the whole Russia thing, unquote. However, the report also says, quote, the evidence also does not establish that Flynn otherwise possessed information damaging to the president that would give the president a personal incentive to end the FBI's inquiry into Flynn's conduct, unquote. And so, as to whether or not Trump committed the crime of obstruction of justice in this instance, the report says, quote, it's unconclusive, unquote, because there's doubt about President Trump's intent. So, we're not going to get him on that one. But in the months that followed the January 27th private meeting, when Donald Trump asked FBI Director Comey to let the Flynn thing go, a request that was ignored by FBI Director Comey, President Trump was assured multiple times that while the FBI was conducting an investigation looking into Russia's efforts to prevent a Clinton presidency, Comey assured Trump in private that he wasn't personally under investigation.
On March the 30th, and I think again on April 11th as well, I told him we're not investigating him personally. That was true.
But knowing that information himself wasn't enough for Donald Trump. He needed us to know. Here's Senator Dianne Feinstein speaking to James Comey.
You described 2 phone calls that you received from President Trump, one on March 30 and one on April 11, where he, quote, described the Russia investigation as a cloud that was impairing his ability, end quote, as president, and asked you, quote, to lift the cloud, end quote. How did you interpret that? And what did you believe he wanted you to do?
I interpret that as he was frustrated that the Russia investigation was taking up so much time and energy. I think he meant of the executive branch, but in the public square in general, and it was making it difficult for him to focus on other priorities of his. But what he asked me was actually narrower than that. So I think what he meant by the cloud, and again, I could be wrong, but what I think he meant by the cloud was the entire investigation is taking up oxygen and making it hard for me to focus on the things I want to focus on. The ask was to get it out that I, the president, am not personally under investigation.
So in the beginning of 2017, President Trump called FBI Director James Comey and asked Comey to tell the press that Donald Trump himself wasn't under investigation. He made this ask multiple times. And I can't stress this enough because the Mueller report makes it super clear that this was extremely important to our narcissistic president. And so now let's fast forward to May 3rd, 2017, when FBI Director Comey was scheduled to testify to Congress in a standard FBI oversight hearing. According to the Mueller report, White House counsel Don McGahn, quote, recalled that in the week leading up to that hearing, the president said that it would be the last straw if Comey did not take the opportunity to set the record straight by publicly announcing that the president was not under investigation, unquote. But Comey don't play that. As the FBI director, he can't clear anyone in an ongoing investigation publicly like that. It's totally improper for him to comment on it at all. And so when FBI Director James Comey testified to Congress on May 3rd, 2017, here's how James Comey handled questions related to the Russia investigation. In these clips, you'll first hear from James Comey, so you should know his voice by now. But then you'll hear him respond to questions from former Senator Al Franken of, who cares, he's not a senator anymore, Senator Mazie Hirono of Hawaii, and Senator Richard Blumenthal of Connecticut in that order.
With respect to the Russia investigation, we treated it like we did with the Clinton investigation. We didn't say a word about it until months into it. And then the only thing we've confirmed so far about this is same thing with the Clinton investigation, that we are investigating. And I would expect we're not going to say another peep about it until we're done.
Any investigation into whether the Trump campaign or Trump operation colluded with Russian operatives would require a full appreciation of the president's financial dealings. Director Comey, would President Trump's tax returns be material to such an investigation?
That's not something, Senator, I'm going to answer.
Does the investigation have access to President Trump's tax returns?
I have to give you the same answer. Again, I hope people don't overinterpret my answers, but I just don't want to start talking about anything, what we're looking at and how. The current investigation with respect to Russia, we've confirmed it. The Department of Justice authorized me to confirm that it exists. We're not going to say another word about it until we're done.
And you do confirm that there is still an ongoing investigation of the Trump campaign and their conduct with regard to Russian efforts to undermine our elections?
We're conducting an investigation to understand whether there was any coordination between the Russian efforts and anybody associated with the Trump campaign.
So since you've already confirmed that such an investigation is ongoing, can you tell us more about what constitutes that investigation?
No.
You have confirmed, I believe, that the FBI is investigating potential ties between Trump associates and the Russian interference in the 2016 campaign, correct?
Yes.
And you have not, to my knowledge, ruled out anyone in the Trump campaign as potentially a target of that criminal investigation, correct?
Well, I haven't said anything publicly about who we've opened investigations on. I've briefed the chair and ranking on who those people are, and so I can't go beyond that in this setting.
Have you ruled out anyone in the campaign that you can disclose?
I don't feel comfortable answering that, Senator, because I think it puts me on a slope to talking about who we're investigating. And
have you ruled out the President of the United States?
I don't want people to overinterpret this answer. I'm not going to comment on anyone in particular because that puts me down a slope of, because if I say no to that, then I have to answer succeeding questions. So what we've done is brief the chair and ranking on who the U.S. persons are that we've opened investigations on, and that's as far as we're going to go at this point.
But as a former prosecutor, you know that when there's an investigation into several potentially culpable individuals, the evidence from those individuals and the investigation can lead to others, correct?
Correct. We're always open-minded about, and we follow the evidence wherever it takes us.
So potentially the President of the United States could be a target of your ongoing investigation into the Trump campaign's involvement with Russian interference in our election, correct?
I just worry. I don't want to answer that because that seems to me unfair speculation. We will follow the evidence. We'll try and find as much as we can, and we'll follow the evidence wherever it leads.
And Trump was pissed. 2 days later, after this testimony, with help from his weaselly little servant, Stephen Miller, President Trump wrote a letter firing FBI Director James Comey. The Trump version of the termination letter said, quote, "Dear Director Comey, while I greatly appreciate your informing me on 3 separate occasions that I am not under investigation concerning the fabricated and politically motivated allegations of a Trump-Russia relationship with respect to the 2016 presidential election, please be informed that I, along with members of both political parties and, most importantly, the American public, have lost faith in you as the director of the FBI and you are hereby terminated," unquote. According to the Mueller report, the White House counsel's office told President Trump that this letter should not, quote, "see the light of day," unquote. But when his staffers tried to rewrite it, President Trump insisted that it say in the letter that Comey had informed the president 3 times that he was not under investigation. He wanted that information to be made public, and this letter was his chance to make that information public. President Trump also requested that Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein draft a letter giving his recommendation that James Comey be fired. Trump told Rosenstein to also include in his letter that Comey had refused to confirm that the president was not personally under investigation as one of the reasons for Rosenstein's recommendation for Comey's dismissal. President Trump also wanted Rosenstein to, quote, "put the Russia stuff in the memo," unquote. Rosenstein did write the recommendation that Comey be fired, but he didn't include the stuff that Trump wanted. But eventually, on May 9th, 2017, 6 days after his testimony to Congress, James Comey was fired by President Trump via a letter written by President Trump. The final version of Comey's firing letter included the following paragraph, quote, "While I greatly appreciate you informing me on 3 separate occasions that I am not under investigation, I nevertheless concur with the judgment of the Department of Justice that you are not able to effectively lead the Bureau," unquote. President Trump was urged multiple times at that point by the White House counsel to let Comey resign, but, quote, "the president was adamant that he be fired," unquote. When he was fired, FBI director was across the country visiting the FBI's Los Angeles office, and President Trump told the acting FBI director, the guy that immediately took Comey's job, that Comey shouldn't be allowed to travel back to Washington, D.C. on the FBI airplane. He also ordered that James Comey not be allowed in the FBI building again, even to collect his own belongings, which is a stunning level of vindictiveness. And so that's how and why James Comey was fired as FBI director. But publicly, the reason the Trump administration told us they fired James Comey was that they said it was done at the recommendation of Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein. They made it seem like it was Rosenstein's idea. Here's Press Secretary Sarah Sanders the morning after FBI Director Comey was fired during her White House press briefing.
The President accepted the recommendation of his Deputy Attorney General to remove James Comey from his position.
The White House's assertion that Rod Rosenstein decided on his own, after being confirmed, to review Comey's performance.
Absolutely.
That sound clip got cut off, but she says absolutely. But anyway, the next day, President Trump then went on television and ran his big orange mouth. Here he is being interviewed by Lester Holt on May 11th, 2 days after Comey was fired.
Monday, you met with the Deputy Attorney General, Rod Rosenstein. Right. Did you ask for a recommendation?
What I did is I was going to fire Comey. My decision. It was not...
You had made the decision before they came in.
I was going to fire Comey. There's no good time to do it, by the way.
Because in your letter you said I accepted their recommendation. Yeah, well, you had already made the decision.
I was going to fire regardless of recommendation.
So there was really...
And he was dumb enough to publicly connect his decision to fire James Comey to the Russia investigation.
And in fact, when I decided to just do it, I said to myself, I said, you know, this Russia thing with Trump and Russia is a made-up story. It's an excuse by the Democrats for having lost an election that they should have won.
About a month later, after Donald Trump said all these things to Lester Holt, James Comey was called before Congress to testify on the circumstances behind his dismissal. You've already heard from some clips from that hearing. And in that June 6, 2017 hearing, here's what former FBI Director James Comey told Congress.
There's no doubt that it's a fair judgment. It's my judgment that I was fired because of the Russia investigation. I was fired in some way to change, or the endeavor was to change the way the Russia investigation was being conducted.
That smells like obstruction of justice, because firing Comey removed the person overseeing the FBI's Russia investigation. But the Mueller report concludes that, quote, the anticipated effect of removing the FBI director would not necessarily be to prevent or impede the FBI from continuing its investigation. As a general manner, FBI investigations run under the operational direction of FBI personnel levels below the FBI director, unquote. Also, this statement in Trump's Lester Holt interview saved his ass.
But when you put out tweets, it's a total hoax, it's a taxpayer charade, and you're looking for a new FBI director, are you not sending that person a message to lay off?
No, I'm not doing that. I think that we have to get back to work, but I want to find out, I want to get to the bottom. If Russia hacked, if Russia did anything having to do with our election, I want to know about it.
On top of that, after firing James Comey, President Trump chose Andrew McCabe to be the acting FBI director, even though McCabe told Trump that he worked very closely with James Comey. But above all else, the Mueller report says that the president has the right to fire the people he directly appoints for just about any reason. And so the firing of James Comey, it would be real hard, if not impossible, to prove that Trump intended to obstruct justice by firing him. But here's the hilarious part. Trump fired Comey because Comey wouldn't tell the world that Donald Trump himself wasn't under investigation, which was true. Here's Susan Collins of Maine, or Senator Susan Collins of Maine, questioning James Comey on June 6, 2017.
Was the president under investigation at the time of your dismissal on May 9th?
No.
But because of the way that Trump fired James Comey and the fact that he himself publicly connected it to the Russia investigation, Donald Trump, the man so desperate to let all of us know that he wasn't under investigation, found himself under investigation. Because it was the firing of James Comey that led to the appointment of special counsel Robert Mueller. And that's when President Trump's crimes began. Special counsel Mueller was appointed to take over the Russia investigation on May 17, 2017, just a little over a week after FBI Director Comey was fired. And here's my favorite part of the Mueller report. I'm going to read it to you. Quote, when Sessions told the president that a special counsel had been appointed, the president slumped back in his chair and said, "Oh my God, this is terrible. This is the end of my presidency. I'm fucked," unquote. Which ironically, at this point, He wasn't. Neither Trump nor anyone on his campaign had colluded with Russia, and he didn't technically obstruct justice by firing James Comey. Everything he did up until this point, according to the Mueller report, he would have been not cleared for, but he likely couldn't have been prosecuted for because of reasonable doubt about his intentions in regards to him asking Comey to let Flynn go, and because he was allowed to fire Comey. He could do that. It was a presidential appointee. So if he had just done nothing from this point forward, Trump wasn't f***ed. But then he f***ed himself. It all started a little over a week after Comey's testimony to Congress about why he had been fired, which is when the public learned that President Trump was under investigation for obstruction of justice by special counsel Robert Mueller. The thing that Trump had tried so hard to prevent, that the public be told that Trump himself was under investigation, had happened in June 2017, and Trump lost his mind. After the story was out, President Trump reacted by calling White House counsel Don McGahn, who is the lawyer for the office of the presidency, not Trump personally, which is an important distinction. But he called White House counsel Don McGahn twice, at home on a weekend, and told him to have Robert Mueller removed from the investigation. Now, Don McGahn knew that this was wrong and wanted no part of it, and so he didn't make the call to the Justice Department. Instead, he drove to his office to resign. His chief of staff was preparing to resign with him. But by Monday morning, neither of them had resigned. McGahn just didn't follow the president's orders, and they all pretended like nothing happened when the new work week started. Super weird. But even though the order wasn't followed, what matters is that President Trump made those calls ordering McGahn to remove Bob Mueller from the investigation. The report says, quote, substantial evidence indicates that the president's attempts to remove the special counsel were linked to the special counsel's oversight of investigations that involved the president's conduct, unquote. It also says, quote, there is also evidence that the president knew he should not have made those calls to McGahn, unquote. And unlike with the Comey firing, the president does not have the power to appoint the special counsel. That's kind of the whole point of having a special counsel. And so he doesn't have the power to fire one at will. President Trump could be convicted of obstruction of justice for ordering the White House counsel to have Bob Mueller removed from the Mueller investigation. This case is strong. And Trump, surprise, surprise, didn't help himself at all when the news about his efforts to fire Mueller became public in January of last year, in 2018. President Trump, when that happened, called Don McGahn into the Oval Office and tried to get McGahn to lie. He wanted Don McGahn to say that Trump never ordered him to fire Bob Mueller. But McGahn refused to lie. He told Trump to his face that the story was accurate and he would not deny it. And here's another juicy nugget from the Mueller report. Quote, in that same meeting, the president challenged McGahn for taking notes of his discussions with the president and asked why he told special counsel investigators that he had been directed to have the special counsel removed. The president asked, what about these notes? Why do you take notes? Lawyers don't take notes. I never had a lawyer who took notes. McGahn responded that he keeps notes because he's a real lawyer, unquote. I love it so much. What I wouldn't give to have been a fly on that wall. I'm a real lawyer. F you, Trump. I love it so much. But this amazing White House scene only strengthens the very strong obstruction of justice case. The reason is, quote, because McGahn had repeatedly spoken to investigators and the obstruction inquiry was not complete, it was foreseeable that he would be interviewed again on obstruction-related topics, unquote. The report then goes on to say, quote, the president acted for the purpose of influencing McGahn's account in order to deflect or prevent further scrutiny of the president's conduct towards the investigation, unquote. So President Trump was trying to change the story of a witness. That's witness tampering, and that's a crime. Donald Trump could also be in big trouble for his efforts to get Jeff Sessions as the attorney general to intervene in the Mueller investigation. First, shortly after the special counsel was appointed, President Trump tried to get Sessions to limit the investigation. On June 19, 2017, the president met one-on-one with a member of his staff in the Oval Office and gave that staffer a message to be delivered to Attorney General Sessions. The message was that President Trump wanted Attorney General Sessions to say this in public. So this is the quote of what Trump was telling Sessions to say to us. Quote, I know that I recused myself from certain things having to do with specific areas, but our POTUS is being treated very unfairly. He shouldn't have a special prosecutor / counsel because he hasn't done anything wrong. I was on the campaign with him for 9 months. There were no Russians involved with him. I know it for a fact because I was there. He didn't do anything wrong except he ran the greatest campaign in American history. I am going to meet with the special prosecutor to explain this is very unfair and let the special prosecutor move forward with investigating election meddling for future elections so that nothing can happen in future elections, unquote. The Mueller report says that this ridiculous message would have had the effect of limiting the Russia investigation to future election interference only, meaning that they wouldn't be able to look at anything that happened in 2016, which of course would gut the investigation. But the message was never delivered to Sessions because the Trump staffer just failed to deliver it. He didn't want there to be an official log of his visit to the Justice Department, so he gave the message to another guy to give to Sessions, but that guy didn't do it. It was like pure incompetency. But the point is that Jeff Sessions never actually got the order from Trump. But again, what matters is that President Trump intended to give that order. In fact, Trump followed up a full month later after Sessions hadn't publicly ordered the Mueller report to be limited. He definitely wanted this order to be given. President Trump also tried over and over again to get Attorney General Sessions to unrecuse himself from the Russia investigation. And I'm going to get into the Jeff Sessions story in detail in the next episode because I want to talk about Trump's relationship with his attorney generals all at once. And so I'll tell you what happened to Sessions in the next episode because that's when we're going to look at what's happening right now with Attorney General William Barr. But the Mueller report does say that, quote, there is evidence that at least one purpose of the president's conduct towards Sessions was to have Sessions assume control over the Russia investigation and supervise it in a way that would restrict its scope, unquote. So Donald Trump could be prosecuted for his actions towards Jeff Sessions. But this didn't seem as solid a case, not compared to when he tried to fire Bob Mueller or the cases of witness tampering, which is what could easily land Trump's fat ass in prison. Now, I've already told you about the witness tampering that Donald Trump did when he tried to get Don McGahn to lie, when he tried to get Don McGahn to say to the press and the special counsel that Trump hadn't tried to fire Bob Mueller when the truth was that he had. So that's witness tampering number one. Donald Trump also tried to prevent Paul Manafort from cooperating with the government. Paul Manafort, again, is the guy who was the lobbyist for Viktor Yanukovych, the Ukrainian president that the Obama administration helped to overthrow. And in October of 2017, Manafort was indicted for crimes related to his work for Yanukovych, crimes that dated back to 2005. And like I said, I'm going to dive down into this rabbit hole for the next episode. But as far as the Mueller report is concerned, Donald Trump publicly dangled the possibility of a pardon in front of Manafort. He did this first by repeatedly stating during Manafort's trial that he supported Manafort and thought he was being treated unfairly. For example, on June 15, 2018, in the hours before a scheduled hearing during which a judge would decide to revoke Manafort's bail because Manafort had tampered with his own witnesses, President Trump had this exchange with a reporter on the White House lawn.
High-profile court cases going on. You've got a former campaign manager, your former lawyer. They're all dealing with legal troubles. Are you paying close attention?
I feel badly about a lot of them because I think a lot of it's very unfair. I mean, I look at some of them where they go back 12 years. Like Manafort has nothing to do with our campaign. But I feel a little badly about it. They went back 12 years to get things that he did 12 years ago.
As if the Justice Department is supposed to just let crimes go if the criminal gets away with it long enough. Spoken like a true criminal there, Mr. Trump. But then 2 days later, Donald Trump's personal lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, said this to Jake Tapper on CNN.
How do you respond to critics who say you discussing it on TV, you discussing it with the New York Daily News, President Trump tweeting that you're sending a signal to defendants in a criminal prosecution that a pardon is out there and might be on its way? Some people think that this is the president and you suggesting that, signaling really, don't cooperate with prosecutors because a pardon is there if you just hold on.
Jake, I don't think that's the interpretation. It's certainly not intended that way. What it should be, I'll tell you what I clearly mean. What I mean is you're not going to get a pardon just because you're involved in this investigation. You probably have a higher burden if you're involved in this investigation as compared to the others who get pardons. But you're certainly not excluded from it if, in fact, the president and his advisors, not me, come to the conclusion that you've been treated unfairly.
So Trump says that Manafort has been treated unfairly, and then his lawyer says on television that people are eligible for pardons if Trump concludes that you've been treated unfairly. Then, in the middle of jury deliberations in the Manafort trial, the President of the United States said this to reporters on the White House lawn.
I think the whole Manafort trial is very sad when you look at what's going on there. I think it's a very sad day for our country. He worked for me for a very short period of time, but you know what? He happens to be a very good person, and I think it's very sad what they've done to Paul Manafort. Thank you very much.
In response to the president's statements that day, Manafort's lawyer said, quote, Mr. Manafort really appreciates the support of President Trump, unquote. So the message had been heard. And 3 months later, around this last Thanksgiving, Mueller's investigators said in a public court filing that Manafort had lied to them, despite a plea deal that he had signed that required Manafort to cooperate with the government's investigations. In an interview in the New York Post 2 days later, President Trump called Manafort, quote, very brave, unquote, because he didn't, quote, flip, unquote. And the Mueller report is quite blunt about what conclusions can be drawn from President Trump and his lawyer's behavior. Quote, the evidence supports the inference that the president intended Manafort to believe that he could receive a pardon, which would make cooperation with the government as a means of obtaining a lesser sentence unnecessary, unquote. It also says, quote, evidence concerning the president's conduct towards Manafort indicates that the president intended to encourage Manafort to not cooperate with the government, unquote. So this is another very strong case for witness tampering. But not as strong as the case for witness tampering related to Michael Cohen. This one is as strong as steel. Michael Cohen was Trump's lawyer from 2006 until May of last year, but he was more than that. Michael Cohen rose to the level of vice president of the entire Trump organization. He was also co-president of Trump Entertainment, when that was a thing, and was a board member of the Eric Trump Foundation. He was one of the most trusted people in the Trump family's inner circle for well over a decade. Starting in September 2015, Michael Cohen negotiated on behalf of the Trump Organization to start a new project in Russia. The Trump Organization wanted a Russian company to build a gaudy, obnoxious tower in Moscow, and the Trump Organization would then slap Trump's name on it, and they would all share the profits. The details of what Michael Cohen did during these negotiations are not scandalous or really all that interesting. What matters here is the timeline. Because Donald Trump told us during the campaign that the project was killed in January 2016, only 4 months after it had started. But according to Michael Cohen...
So to be clear, Mr. Trump knew of and directed the Trump-Moscow negotiations throughout the campaign and lied about it. He lied about it because he never expected to win. He also lied about it because he stood to make hundreds of millions of dollars on the Moscow real estate project.
And Michael Cohen lied about that timeline, both to Congress and to Mueller's investigators. Here's Michael Cohen again. And all of these clips, by the way, are from Michael Cohen's testimony before the House Oversight Committee on February 27th, 2019.
You need to know that Mr. Trump's personal lawyers reviewed and edited my statement to Congress about the timing of the Moscow Tower negotiations before I gave it.
But the Mueller report says that because it was Trump's lawyers and not Trump himself who wrote the false testimony with Cohen, Trump can't be held responsible for that. But the main thing to know is that for a while, for all of 2017 and over half of 2018, Michael Cohen lied for Trump. And here's why he said he lied.
Every day, most of us knew we were coming in and we were going to lie for him on something. And that became the norm. And that's exactly what's happening right now in this country. And it's exactly what's happening here in government, sir.
Things got more complicated in January 2018 when the Wall Street Journal told the world that Michael Cohen had arranged a $130,000 payment to porn star Stormy Daniels to shut her up because she threatened to tell the public that she had had an affair with Donald Trump during his marriage to Melania, which is so gross. Ugh. But the Mueller investigation did not investigate this payment. However, this payment was a campaign finance violation. Michael Cohen was prosecuted by a federal court in New York City for facilitating this payoff, and he pled guilty to committing that crime on behalf of Donald Trump. But what I want you to store in your brain bank is the information that the Stormy Daniels payment was a crime, definitely. And that investigation and resulting court cases were being conducted in New York. It's a whole other thing. So, with that stored in your brains, let's move on. It's now April 2018. Cohen has lied to Congress, and the prosecutors in New York are aware of and investigating the Stormy Daniels payment. But on April 9th, 2018, the FBI, working with the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York, the ones prosecuting the Stormy Daniels case, they raided Michael Cohen's home and his office. And that afternoon, Trump said this during his cabinet meeting that was supposed to be about Syria, but you know Trump.
So I just heard that they broke into the office of one of my personal attorneys, good man, and it's a disgraceful situation. It's a total witch hunt. I've been saying it for a long time. I've wanted to keep it down. We've given, I believe, over 1 million pages worth of documents to the special counsel. They continue to just go forward, and here we are talking about Syria. We're talking about a lot of serious things with the greatest fighting force ever. And I have this witch hunt constantly going on for over 12 months now.
A few days after that, President Trump called Michael Cohen on the phone and encouraged him to, quote, hang in there, unquote, and, quote, stay strong, unquote. Then, on 4/20 of last year, the day after the New York Times published an article about how Trump treats Michael Cohen like his little bitch, Trump said, as part of one of his long, rambling tweet storms, that Michael Cohen was, quote, a fine person with a wonderful family. Michael is a businessman for his own account / lawyer, who I have always liked and respected. Most people will flip if the government lets them out of trouble, even if it means lying or making up stories. Sorry, I don't see Michael doing that despite the horrible witch hunt and the dishonest media, unquote. And Trump kept praising Michael Cohen publicly like that for months. Here Trump is again on the White House lawn on June 15th, 2018.
Is he still your lawyer?
No, he's not my lawyer, but
your personal lawyer, and not anymore.
But I always liked Michael.
Are you?
And he's a good person.
Are you worried that he will cooperate?
Do you mind if I talk?
I just want to know if you're worried.
You're asking me a question. I'm trying to ask.
Just want to know if you're worried if he's going to cooperate with federal investigators.
No, I did nothing wrong.
Got it.
Nothing wrong.
Got it.
But then on August 21st, 2018, everything changed when Michael Cohen pled guilty in the Southern District of New York to 8 felony charges, including the campaign finance violation that was the Stormy Daniels payment. During his plea hearing, Cohen said that he had worked at the direction of Donald Trump in making that payment. He directly connected Donald Trump to that crime. Which, duh, of course he did it at Trump's direction. But now Michael Cohen had said it out loud. He was clearly no longer protecting Donald Trump. And less than 2 days later, here's what Donald Trump had to say about Michael Cohen to Ainsley Earnhardt on Fox and Friends.
He makes a better deal when he uses me, like everybody else. And one of the reasons I respect Paul Manafort so much is he went through that trial. You know, they make up stories. People make up stories. This whole thing about flipping, they call it. I know all about flipping. For 30, 40 years, I've been watching flippers. Everything's wonderful, and then they get 10 years in jail, and they flip on whoever the next highest one is, or as high as you can go. It almost ought to be outlawed. It's not fair.
And in the months that followed Cohen's plea agreement and his cooperation with the government investigations, Donald Trump continued to speak about Michael Cohen in public. Here he is again on the White House lawn speaking to reporters on Thanksgiving week.
He was convicted of various things unrelated to us. He was given a fairly long jail sentence, and he's a weak person. And by being weak, unlike other people that you watch, he's a weak person, and what he's trying to do is get a reduced sentence. So he's lying about a project that everybody knew about.
And by the end of last year, Donald Trump had started adding comments about Michael Cohen's family to his anti-Cohen statements. People that he had labeled wonderful before Cohen started cooperating with the government. For example, on December 12, 2018, President Trump tweeted that Michael Cohen's, quote, family was temporarily let off the hook, unquote. And then in January, after we found out that Michael Cohen was scheduled to testify to Congress in public on February 7th, Trump went on Fox News, of course, and said this to Jeanine Pirro.
Look, I was a client of his, and, you know, you're supposed to have lawyer-client privilege, but it doesn't matter because I'm a very honest person, frankly. But he's in trouble on some loans and fraud and taxi cabs and stuff that I know nothing about. And in order to get a sentence reduced, he says, I have an idea. I'll give you some information on the president. Well, there is no information, but he should give information maybe on his father-in-law, because that's the one that people want to look at, because where does that money? That's the money in the family. And I guess he didn't want to talk about his father-in-law. He's trying to get his sentence reduced.
A few days after that, President Trump tweeted about Michael Cohen again, and tagging Fox News, he said, quote, watch father-in-law, exclamation point, unquote. And then on January 23rd, Michael Cohen postponed his testimony to Congress, citing threats to his family. Now, a month later, Michael Cohen did end up testifying to Congress. He had worked with Congress about some kind of protection. And during that testimony, he was asked multiple times why he was afraid of President Donald Trump. And here's one of the more chilling moments from that hearing.
And when Mr. Trump turned around early in the campaign and said, I can shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue and get away with it.
I have the most loyal people. Did you ever see that? Where I could stand in the middle of Fifth Avenue and shoot somebody and I wouldn't lose any voters, okay? It's like incredible. I have the most loyal people. Did you ever see that? Where I could stand in the middle of Fifth Avenue and shoot somebody and I wouldn't lose any voters, okay? It's like incredible.
I want to be very clear. He's not joking. He's telling you the truth. You see, you don't know him. I do. I sat next to this man for 10 years, and I watched his back.
And here's one nugget from the hearing that I wish someone had followed up on. Here's Representative Jim Cooper of Tennessee questioning Michael Cohen.
Have you ever seen Mr. Trump personally threaten people with physical harm?
No. He would use others.
Michael Cohen testified that Donald Trump had gotten his minions to threaten people with physical violence. I'd love to know more details about that. You know, how thuggish is Donald Trump? President Donald Trump. We know he threatens lawsuits all the time, but how often does he threaten people physically? What was Cohen thinking of when he said that? And has Trump ever acted on his threats or had a minion act on a physical threat for him? Because Michael Cohen saw something that made him say that. Michael Cohen saw something to make him think that Donald Trump has used his minions to threaten people physically in the past. And I think this is one of the key moments of the Michael Cohen hearing, and it makes no sense to me that it wasn't followed up on. I desperately want to know more. But it is what it is. No one followed up on it. But I think what's clear here is that Michael Cohen thinks that his former boss, our current president, is a dangerous man who believes himself to be above the law. And Representative Barbara Lawrence of Michigan asked Cohen what the result of the president's verbal attacks on him and his family were.
Mr. Cohen, why do you feel or believe that the president is repeatedly attacking you? You are stating that you feel intimidated, asking us to protect you, following your cooperation with the law enforcement.
When you have access to 60+ million people that follow you on social media, and you have the ability within which to spark some action by individuals that follow him, and from his own words that he can walk down Fifth Avenue, shoot someone, and get away with it. It's never comfortable when the President of the United States...
What do you think he can do to you?
A lot. And it's not just him. It's those people that follow him in his rhetoric.
What is a lot?
I don't know. I don't walk with my wife if we go to a restaurant or we go somewhere. I don't walk with my children. I make them go before me because I have fear. And it's the same fear that I had before when he initially decided to drop that tweet in my cell phone. I receive some, and I'm sure you'll understand, I received some tweets, I received some Facebook Messenger, all sorts of social media attacks upon me, whether it's the private direct message that I've had to turn over to Secret Service because they are the most vile, disgusting statements that anyone can never receive. And when it starts to affect your children, that's when it really affects you.
So the president's comments and tweets did have an effect. And here's what Michael Cohen said that effect was intended to be.
And when he goes on Twitter and he starts bringing in my in-laws, my parents, my wife, what does he think is going to happen? He's sending out the same message that he can do whatever he wants. This is his country. He's becoming an autocrat. And hopefully something bad will happen to me and my children and my wife so that I will not be here and testify. That's what his hope was. It was to intimidate me.
Which is witness tampering. And here's the thing about this particular instance of witness tampering, because even though the Mueller report says very clearly multiple times that it is possible to obstruct justice into an investigation and be found guilty of that obstruction, even if the person didn't commit the underlying crime, So like Trump, even though he and everyone on his campaign was found essentially not guilty of conspiring with Russia to steal and release the Democrats' emails, he could be prosecuted for trying to interfere with that investigation anyway. But it doesn't help the prosecutor's case at all when the person is innocent of the underlying crime. But in the case of Michael Cohen, the Mueller report says, quote, the president's concern about Cohen cooperating may have been directed at the Southern District of New York investigation into other aspects of the president's dealings with Cohen rather than an investigation of Trump Tower Moscow, unquote. So it wasn't just the Russia investigation that this witness tampering affected. It affected the crimes being prosecuted in New York. And it was Donald Trump that laid the wood to Stormy Daniels. He's the central figure in that payoff. That's a motive. And the Mueller report is quite clear what they think the goal was. It says, quote, the president's statements insinuating that members of Cohen's family committed crimes after Cohen began cooperating with the government could be viewed as an effort to retaliate against Cohen and chill further testimony adverse to the president by Cohen or others, unquote. That's as strong a case for witness tampering as I can imagine. And that might not be all. There is another person in the witness tampering section of the Mueller report, but everything related to this person is redacted, citing that there would be harm to an ongoing investigation if it was made public. Now, I have a strong suspicion about who this section refers to, but I'm not going to say it because I don't know for sure. But what this means is that when that investigation is done, we will see the rest of this section. And it means that there might be another witness that Trump tampered with. And so, in summary, even though Donald Trump and the members of the campaign are innocent of Trump-Russia, Russiagate didn't happen. They did not conspire with a foreign government in any way to change the outcome of the 2016 election. We do, however, have strong cases of witness tampering in regards to Don McGahn, Paul Manafort, and Michael Cohen, on top of a strong obstruction of justice case arising from Trump's efforts to fire Bob Mueller at the start of his investigation. That's at least 4 very strong cases that the current president of the United States, Donald J. Trump, committed crimes. But Bob Mueller didn't indict him on any of these crimes. Well, here's why. The reason President Trump isn't under indictment for obstruction of justice is because he's the current president of the United States. And the Mueller team determined that the current president can't be indicted for these crimes in the regular court system. Because he can't be prosecuted right now in the normal courts, the Mueller team decided that they couldn't print a conclusion on the crime he's quite clearly guilty of, obstruction of justice, because the current president of the United States wouldn't be able to get a fair trial without access to the courts, which is a basic American right. However, the current president can get a trial in the Senate, and so that's the jurisdiction, Congress, that the Mueller report turns this process over to. And so, if we want Donald Trump to be indicted for the at least 4 crimes the Mueller report proves, then he has to be removed from office, either by Congress or by us voters. Now, the pathway for us voters to remove him is obvious. Vote anybody else in 2020. The pathway for Congress to remove him from the presidency is a trial in the Senate. The trial in the Senate is the last step of the impeachment process. The full impeachment process starts with a vote in a House of Representatives committee, and then it gets a vote in the full House of Representatives, and then there's a trial in the Senate. A Senate decision is what would remove President Trump from office. Or we could let him get away with his crimes by voting for him again and prove once again that rich and powerful people really are above the law in the United States. Those are our options, and I'll leave it up to you to decide what you want to do. There is one indictment that as Americans collectively, we need to make. And that's an indictment of the U.S. corporate media. As put by one of my favorite journalists going back almost 20 years, Matt Taibbi, after the 2016 election, the storyline instantly became that Donald Trump was an illegitimate president, a foreign operative who cheated his way into office and would therefore need to be removed ahead of schedule. This storyline gave a lot of panicked people absolutely horrified by Donald Trump's win, a lot of hope. And I know a lot of very smart people who I respect so much, who ate up every bit of this story. For 2 years, over 2 years, every single discovery that anyone even remotely connected to the Trump campaign was even remotely connected to someone who was even remotely connected to anyone Russian was treated like earth-shattering breaking news. And people who wanted to believe that this was going to take down President Trump ate it up hand over fist. And I don't fault them for this. I don't fault you for this if you were one of them. Because the journalists who did this were the ones who were irresponsible. They misled you. For example, here's just a few headlines from the last few years. Huffington Post, December 2016, quote, the Trump campaign was in on Russia's election hacking, unquote, which was not true. Then there was Reuters in May 2017, quote, Clinton says Trump campaign likely guided Russians before U.S. election, unquote, which nope, they didn't, and Reuters just printed a Clinton lie. Then there was New York Magazine in July 2018 that said, quote, will Trump be meeting with his counterpart or his handler? A plausible theory of mind-boggling collusion, unquote. Plausible theory? Eat my ass. That's guessing, not journalism. Then there's the Daily Beast in January 2019, quote, Trump dodges question on Fox News if he's a Russian agent, unquote, which he probably dodged because he's not a Russian agent. And then there's the oh-so-reputable New York Times in November 2018 that said, quote, Trump is compromised by Russia, unquote, which no, he wasn't. And no, he isn't. And his actions prove that more than anything. Since taking office, President Trump has escalated our economic war with Russia by enacting sanctions, including sanctions on President Putin's inner circle. President Trump has also ordered Russian diplomatic properties to be shut down in San Francisco, Washington, D.C., New York City, and he closed the Russian consulate in Seattle. That's in addition to kicking 60 Russian diplomats out of our country. President Trump also sent so-called lethal weapons the regime changer himself, President Obama, refused to send into Ukraine, where the government we helped install has been fighting Russians since 2014. So just to be crystal clear, President Trump sent weapons to Ukraine to be used to kill Russians. And President Trump bombed the government of Syria. President Obama obviously dropped bombs all over Syria too, but they always at least pretended that they were doing so to fight ISIS. But Trump bombed the government that is allied with Russia, the government that the Russian military has been defending. Putin's puppet wouldn't do that. And by the way, neither of those things are good. By forcing someone as insecure and immature as Trump to prove that he's tough on Russia, he's escalating wars with a nuclear power. This is not something that should be encouraged. But it was encouraged by an irresponsible corporate media class that pushed this Putin's puppet storyline in order to be rewarded with millions of dollars in ad money. Money that came in because they preyed upon the understandably upset Americans who didn't want Donald Trump to be their president and were desperate for any hope of a way out of this dystopian nightmare. Cable news ads hauled in a whopping 25% more money in 2017, the peak of the Trump-Russia hysteria, than they had in election year 2016, with MSNBC, the main Russiagate peddling network, jumping 62%. Usually ratings fall sharply in the year after a presidential election, but this Russiagate bullshit was network gold. The journalists that did this were not concerned with the truth. They were concerned with the ratings because the ratings equal ad dollars, and that equals dollars in their own pockets. Maybe I'm able to see this clearer than others because I'm in the same business. I produce an internet radio show, a teeny tiny, sad little show, but I am an executive producer of a show. But I have made the conscious choice to refuse to participate in their business model, and this is precisely why. There's so much money in corporate ads that at a certain point, you can't help but choose your words in order to please those that pay you. And I think that the only way to stay focused on doing honest, independent work in this field is to do it 100% for the audience, not the ad buyers, not the companies. And the only way to do that is to abstain from the ad business altogether. And I'm hoping you'll help me do that. The business model I have chosen is essentially the honor system. It's value for value. I give you something of value and you pay me whatever this product is worth to you. In terms of this episode, I read 448 pages of the Mueller report, watched 3 congressional hearings, and subjected myself to hours of interviews of Donald Trump. And I added hours of extra work to my plate by giving you every single one of my sources, including my highlighted PDF of the Mueller report, transcripts of all the sound clips and links to their sources, and links to all the documents and articles that I used. The upside to doing all that and refusing all the ad money is that I can tell you whatever I believe to be true, regardless of who it might offend. There is no company that has the power to threaten my funding and shut me up. You also get to listen to an entire podcast that doesn't waste any of your time with ads that you either tolerate or fast forward through. I mean, don't you hate it when an episode is broken up with ads? And so I love this business model. But the downside is that if you decide to pay me nothing for my work, I get nothing for my work. My salary is 100% in your control, just like it was when I was a waitress. Although, as a waitress, I did get a really sad, minimum wage, hourly rate, but like most of my money came through tips. But now, instead of me bringing you a burger, I'm bringing you a summary of weeks worth of research. What do you value more, the burger or this podcast? If the answer is this podcast, and I hope it is, as delicious as burgers are, please support the podcast using whatever option is most appealing to you. If you want to ensure the podcast gets every one of your pennies, if you want to cut out all the middlemen, you can contribute using Zelle, Venmo, or paper checks, because we have an address in Florida that forwards me all of the podcast's mail, and you can send your checks there. If you want to use your credit or debit card, we have a PayPal account for one-item contributions or monthly subscriptions, which are way down for some reason, actually, and we could really use some new monthly sustaining donations if that's an option that you're up for. If you want to pay per episode, we also have a Patreon account, and Patreon also gives you access to our private feed, which includes a golf swing-free version of every episode, and now a bonus episode. Because during my research for this episode, I released on our Patreon feed a Mystery Science Theater 3000 type episode, which features my husband and I watching all of Michael Cohen's testimony. So basically, you can join us on the couch as I chose the clips for this episode and talked shit with my husband. It was really fun. And I plan to do a lot more of those since I watch hearings all the time, but that is now available to everyone on Patreon. And on top of that, we also have the Cash App, $ Congressional Dish, and we do accept a few cryptocurrencies. We also have merchandise available for purchase in the Congressional Dish store. And speaking of the Congressional Dish store, we could also use your help with marketing, and so I want to try an experiment. I'm going to give a free Congressional Dish t-shirt of your choice to the marketing department member of the month. And I don't know what exactly you need to do to be that person because I suck at marketing, and that's kind of the point. I want to see what you do to share the podcast and your favorite episodes with your social networks. The 3 networks I'll be monitoring are Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And so in your posts and tweets, please tag Congressional Dish's Facebook page and my personal Instagram and Twitter. Both are at Jen Briney. The person whose posts we love the most will win the t-shirt, and the marketing team member of the month of May will be announced in the first episode in June. I'm really excited to see what you guys do because I'm always amazed by the creativity of the people in this community. So please participate and good luck. But the point is that I need your help to keep doing this. I need your help to maintain this show's existence and its independence, and I need your help to make it grow. We're all in this era of madness together. And so the question is, do you want this podcast to continue to help you understand what's going on? If the answer is yes, you know what to do. And now, for the rest of this episode, I'm going to thank the people who paid for the last episode. And so, class dismissed. It's time to have some fun. Hi, Joe Briney.
Hi, Jen Briney.
We're doing the thank yous, and I'm having a little bit of deja vu because we're in the same position we were last time. And I just made you turn off golf again. Although this looks even more boring than last time because I didn't even see Tiger.
Tiger didn't make the cut.
How's that possible? He won the last one.
That's what happens. It's an unpredictable game.
Ugh, barf. Well.
And the guy who's ahead is way ahead.
Don't care, even a little bit. There's no part of me that can muster any bit of shits to give about this.
Then I guess we'll be spending our Saturday separate.
No, we won't. I'll just take over the television.
That's bullshit.
I know. I let you run wild with your sports. But you're not going to keep watching golf with the Portland Trailblazers in the basketball playoffs.
Oh, golf will be over sooner. Then I'll go to the store, pick up dinner fixins.
And then it's basketball.
Yes.
Do I have any say in this day?
You can do whatever you want.
Just not in this room, huh?
I can switch rooms.
No, you can't. If you're cooking, you need this TV. Don't lie to me, sir.
That's true.
Yeah, it's fine. Don't care. But yeah, now let's have some fun. So this is the part of the show where we thank the people that made this podcast possible. We have a few announcements. One is there is now an episode of a podcast called Fallacious Trump, which I went on technically months ago. We recorded that, but they recently released it. And so if you guys want to hear more of me talking about Trump, you can listen to that. And I can't tell you what we talked about because it was a long time ago. He's one of those podcasters that does the batching thing that I can't do. So he records a bunch of stuff and then releases it on his schedule and is able to take vacations and stuff. And that's just not my life. So yeah, I don't remember the conversation. All I remember about it is that I enjoyed it. So it's probably a good episode. So I guess let's get to it. And I have a couple, well, actually I have 4 clips that I just thought were like fun. And I couldn't find any reason to put them in the main episode because they had nothing to do with anything. But in the research for this episode, there were 4 clips, 3 of them about Trump and 1 of them was Trump. So I think throughout the thank yous, we play these just for fun, right?
Sure.
So do you want to do the first one? I know that you've already heard this one, Joe Briney, because this was one of your favorites during the Cohen hearing, which, by the way, I think I already mentioned this, but just to be sure, we do have a bonus episode up on Patreon right now, which is Joe and I watching the Cohen hearing. And for those of you who are financially contributing but aren't on Patreon, I do have a way to get you that episode. It's a gangster way. I'm just giving you the MP3, but you can put that manually into your podcast app until we can get the green room up and running. So here is one of Joe Briney's favorite clips from the Cohen hearing.
Mr. Trump directed me to find a straw bidder to purchase a portrait of him that was being auctioned off at an Art Hamptons event. The objective was to ensure that this portrait, which was going to be auctioned last, would go for the highest price of any portrait that afternoon. The portrait was purchased by the fake bidder for $60,000. Mr. Trump directed the Trump Foundation, which is supposed to be a charitable organization, to repay the fake bidder, despite keeping the art for himself.
That just sums him up completely. It's just, I can't think of a better anecdote to describe President Trump.
Like who he is. That's the most narcissistic thing I've ever heard in my life. But it's so sad. Like he so desperately wanted to be able to say that his portrait went for the most amount of money. And he was so insecure and probably knowing that that wasn't going to be the case that he had to rig it.
I mean,
that's like, awful.
Who would even buy it in the first place, let alone make it the highest or what the highest bid was on?
I think portraits of people are weird. Like I can't think of a single portrait of a single person that I would ever hang on my wall.
Yeah.
It's just odd. So I want to know what that portrait looks like. Like, is he sitting in a chair? Does he have a crown on?
I don't know if I'd go with crown. Is
he getting blown by Stormy Daniels?
All right, I might pay for that one.
I know, right? That would be a good one.
No, it's funny because like every picture of him that he puts on Twitter, he's sitting behind a desk and there's like either a pile of newspapers or reports or something. And they're all just like splayed out so you can see that.
Like, hey guys, I read.
Yeah, exactly. It's totally just like, I read all these things. It's like, no, you didn't.
Yeah. And we know that now. That's the thing about the presidency. Like he could have faked that he was a good businessman if he had just left it at that. You know, like he had this TV persona that he was good at business, and with private businesses, you can keep a lot of stuff private, but now that he's the president, he can't. It's just, he should have just left well enough alone. We never would have known about any of this because who gives a shit?
Are you saying he did something stupid?
Yes. Yes, that's kind of like the whole point of this entire episode, which you haven't heard yet, but I think you're going to enjoy it. Okay, so let's thank our highest contributor of this episode, who was once again Mike Coverdale, who he gave us 3 payments. One was $195, and with that payment on Venmo, he said, "Thank you for the depth of research." That was for episode 195, which was my last one. That was the Yemen episode. And he said, "I'll be sharing widely and asking everyone to contact their Republicans in Congress to overturn the president's veto," which is awesome. Thank you for doing that. He also gave us a $27 Venmo payment that says, "Your Biden rant is epic. If you can clip just that part and send it in a way I can share it on Facebook, please do. It summarizes my view exactly." Yeah, I can do that.
It's a really good idea.
Yeah, I think so. I'll put that on my Monday to-do list. Biden. Okay, so yeah, I'll do that. How do you think it's best to share it on Facebook? I guess if I put it into Libsyn the same way I do with the bonus episodes for the non-Patreon people, then he can just share the MP3.
You're asking the wrong person. Yeah. I send on to Facebook like once every 3 weeks.
Yeah. And you don't do any of the posting work. Yeah, I have a way I can jerry rig this, and I can put it on Patreon too. I know that Mike isn't on Patreon, but some of you are, and like whatever. It's unlimited data in Patreon, so it doesn't hurt anything. So I'll do that on Monday. Good idea, Mike. And then his last message since the last episode also came with $27, and it said Ukraine/Biden education. We will find out how serious the Republicans are in exposing this mainstream. If they don't, it will be in fear of their own skeletons. Well, that's going to be a lot of the next episode with all the Ukraine stuff and the Mueller report. So yeah, good catch. But Joe Biden, man, they really are pushing him on us. Oh, actually, I was just on Twitter. Apparently 3 of the networks right now are running Biden's comments in like Iowa or something, just unfiltered. Like that's their weekend programming. They're just letting Biden talk. It's like there's 20 something people running for the Democratic nomination, and he's on all 3 of the networks just getting to say what he wants. Like this feels very much like Hillary all over again. And it makes sense since their policies are pretty much identical. But yeah, here we go again. We'll see if they actually rig it this time, though. We also got some raises, which are really helpful in Patreon, because we actually took right now in Patreon. Let's see, in April, I just checked. We lost money in April on Patreon. Not like it cost us money, but we didn't go up, even though we had all these new people. Because every week I read the new people that sign up to help the podcast, but I don't shout out all the people that fire me. I probably should, because we actually went down in April. And then in May, we just took a really big hit this morning, actually, which kind of hurt my feelings. But we're up $5 in May. So all of the raises really do help. And we could use some new people on Patreon. But we did get a raise from Randy Diddle, who gave us a raise from $5 an episode to $6. Thank you, Randy. We got a raise from Robin Thurkel. And I noticed this one this morning. Robin gives us $20 an episode on Zelle. We think it's Zelle. Lauren thinks it's Zelle. But she's also now contributing on Patreon. I think she wanted the bonus episodes. And everyone can get the bonus episodes, but Patreon makes it so easy. So thank you for not being a pain in the ass, Robin. I really appreciate you. Mark Sheed also gave us a raise from $3 an episode to $5 an episode. Thank you, Mark. And then Graham Kimmel gave us a raise on Zelle from $2 a month to $5 a month. So you guys are all very much appreciated. Joe Briney, are you ready for another Cohen clip about President Trump?
Always.
Always. All right, let's go.
When I say con man, I'm talking about a man who declares himself brilliant, but directed me to threaten his high school, his colleges, and the college board to never release his grades or SAT scores.
How bad do you think they were?
I'll bet he was probably like a C student.
Yeah. Which actually, like, fine.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like
I don't care.
Yeah. That one, like, again, it's not surprising because of who he is, but at the same time, like, I could see anybody doing that. Like
threatening their colleges
but
to not release their scores if they're running for president of the United States. You can see anyone doing that.
No, but like, if you think about it, like, even just somebody who like is a high profile person, if you had shitty grades in college and you had like a business and you were trying to like advertise yourself that you knew what you were doing, but like you didn't want your C average to get out there, like I could see people telling the university like, hey, this is private information, don't release this. Like that's less shocking to me than like the portrait one is just pure gold. Right? This one is less shocking. I could see other non-narcissistic people doing this.
I guess I'm just one of those people that's like, okay, see my grades.
Yeah, but
I don't care.
He's definitely not. And if you like...
But he is trying to tell us that he's brilliant just by saying it, which is so sad because we know that he's not. And so there's just so much of this, because it's the first time I feel like we've really studied him since doing this show. And I just find the whole thing sad.
Yeah, when you look at this with everything else that he does, then yeah, it just adds to the pile of things that make him look like an asshole. But by itself, I don't think it's so bad or shocking.
I guess it's the threatening them part where he has money, or at least he tells us he has money. I feel like, especially with the college we went to Loyola Marymount University, which worships money. And so I think what we would do is buy them a library and say, please don't release our information. I guess I would just rather do, the kind way instead of, I know I'm running for president and the public has a right to know, but I'm going to sue you and fuck you. Like, it's just such a, He's just mean.
Yeah.
I guess that's one of the parts that bothers me. I guess I understand what you're saying, that there should be some privacy for that type of stuff. But just, I don't know, getting Michael Cohen to threaten them, like, just gross. That's all.
And like getting good grades doesn't mean you're smart, and getting bad grades doesn't mean you're dumb. So it's like that can definitely be taken out of context too. So it's just sort of like,
I don't think that I'm all that smart. I'm good at taking tests. I think that's why I'm good at Congressional Dish and like pretty bad with, I'm not bad at going on other podcasts, but I do get kind of worried because I don't retain information very well. I mean, you know this, you're married to me. I can't remember anything. So I'm able to hold on to the information. I get it out and then it's gone, which really works in high school and college because that's basically what you're doing. Like hold on to the information, get it onto the piece of paper and then it's done. But I mean, I would take a test and get an A on it in the morning. And by the afternoon, I couldn't even tell you what the answers were. So there's just different skills that you need in high school and college that you don't necessarily need anymore when you're an adult. You know, like you didn't have great grades. No. I kind of aired. Sorry to air your dirty laundry, but
sue you.
Yeah, you're gonna take down Congressional Dish. But I know that you're smart. You're smarter than me. You were just, if you didn't care about the topic, you didn't care about the topic.
Yeah, I didn't do a lot of my homework.
Yeah, I remember from senior year, Joe had to take poetry, and he just didn't.
I scraped by poetry and art. If I didn't graduate, it would have been because of those classes and not like thermodynamics.
Yeah, and you did fine in those classes, I'm sure, because you were into it.
Yeah, I usually got like A's and B's in my engineering classes, and
yeah, because you cared.
Yeah.
So I don't judge people by their grades, but I do judge them by their behavior, and it's just that behavior. Be like, hey, fixer, go threaten my colleges. It's like, ugh, what a loser. That's all. All right, so now let's thank the new subscribers. We do have some. Ooh, this makes me feel better. Henry Clays, or nope, sorry. This probably happens to him all the time. Clays Henry is now giving us a $35 check per month. He's from Rancho Palos Verdes, California. So thank you, Clays. That makes me feel better. The checks I never get to see. I only see them on these thank yous. So it does help when I see those on the list. I shouldn't have checked Patreon this morning. It definitely made me feel bad. But also on Patreon, we now have Justin Becker, who's contributing $7.16 per episode. Plus, he contributed $200 on Zelle.
Nice.
Hell yeah, Justin. And he said, here's a signing bonus for my heretofore freeloading behavior. No more. I'm about to become a Patreon patron for $7.16 per episode, originally from Wester. That's awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah, we're coming up on the 200th episode of Congressional Dish.
Wow.
Yeah, this is 196 that we're doing right now. So I think actually the first episode of July will be the 200th episode, and I have no idea what to do about that. Like, I have no special plan for it or anything, but that feels like a pretty huge milestone. So,
congratulations.
Don't congratulate me yet. I could still quit. I have to actually make it there before I get the congratulations. But yeah, awesome. Thanks, Justin. We're also now getting $20 an episode, woohoo, from Joshua McVeigh on Patreon. Thank you, Joshua. We're also getting $10 an episode from Andrew Florio, and he sent in an email. He said, "Hi, Jen. Just wanted to thank you so much for hosting the show for so long and sticking to the listener-supported model. I've listened to your show off and on for around 3 years now, and I felt bad every time I wasn't able to send out any spare funds since I was going through school. I love how many people are in school and listening to this show. It gives me so much hope for the future. I just assumed that this would be something that baby boomers would be into. Like when I started it, I didn't know if our generation or younger would be interested, but like we have so many young people that are way younger than me, people in high school, people in college that are not only listening, but supporting it. And it's like, nothing makes me happier.
That's awesome.
I know, it really is. Back to Andrew's note, who said, it enables me to feel optimistic about the future. Well, you make me optimistic about the future. Back to the note, and that there are actual journalists out there who are not going with the ebbs and flows of what CNN or other tomfoolery news stations are pushing out there without any historical, factual context backed up with sources. Well, I've recently got a great job. Congratulations. And can afford the long overdue $10 a month subscription for a good cause such as yours. Keep up the great work, Andrew. Andrew, thank you very much. I just want to let you know that Patreon is per episode. So what you actually pledged is $10 per episode, which is $20 per month right now with my release schedule. I don't charge anyone on Patreon for the bonus episodes. Those are purely bonus. Those are free. But I do 2 main Congressional Dish episodes a month. And if for whatever reason I bust out another one, you could get hit for more money. So there are settings there where you can set a max. So if you want to keep it to $20 a month, you can tell Patreon that and they'll charge you for no more than $10 per episode. But I keep that in mind, and I will not be offended if you want to switch it to $5 an episode, because that's what it sounds like you intended. I truly want you guys to contribute whatever value you get from this. So yeah, just don't want to trick you there. But thank you so much for signing up to help the show and for letting me know why you did it. God, I love you guys. We also are now getting $7.50 an episode from Tony Andres. Thank you, Tony. That's on Patreon. We are also getting $15 a month from Stacey Tibbetts on Zelle. Thanks, Stacey. No middleman with Zelle. Love it. Jason Bryant. Jason's one of my favorites. He's giving us $5 an episode on Patreon. And Jason he's a big fucking deal now. So I met him at New Media Expo, the one where it was the last New Media Expo where everything went to the one I went to with my friend Matt. Remember that? Mm-hmm. And I met Jason. He was podcasting about wrestling at the time. And since then, he got the blue check mark on Twitter because he went to the Olympics and was the commentator for it. And
so like real wrestling, not like slamming a chair into somebody's back.
Like in spandex, rub your balls on others kind of wrestling, like not WWE.
I thought that was all
wrestling. Jason's going to hear this and be like, bitch. But no, like real wrestling. And so he's just become one of the most important people in the wrestling commentating world. And I'm just so proud of my friend. And the way that I know him, I mean, I don't give a damn about wrestling, but we went to the Riviera before they blew it up. And so there was a bunch of people playing craps and I didn't want to. And so Jason and I just kind of sat by some slot machine and just like giggled for hours. And so he's one of my favorite people in podcasting. And he always has something that prevents him from going to all the podcasting conventions. And so I haven't seen him in years, but he still remains one of like my favorite friends in the industry. And now he's supporting my podcast. And I'm just so proud of him and so happy to have his friendship and his support. And yeah, Jason, I want to see yo ass. Show up to Florida in August and go to Podcast Movement. And then we can hang out because I'm done with all my chores before the podcast movement even starts, since I'm doing orientation. So we can have fun this year. Go. And that goes for everyone else. If you want to meet me, like I just said, like at Podcast Movement, I'm doing the orientation and then I'm done with my chores. And so I will be hanging this year. So if you want to meet me, that's the place to go. And I'm sure I'll disappoint you, but we'll still have some fun. We also got, or are getting now, $5 an episode from Mickey Fox on Patreon. Thank you, Mickey. We're also getting $5 an episode on Patreon from Greg Westneat. Thank you, Greg. On PayPal, we've been going way down on the monthly subscriptions. I don't know what's up with that, but this will help because Jordan Gartenhouse is now giving us $5 a month. And he sent in an email. It said, I just finished listening to one of your podcasts for the first time. And he's already contributing. That's awesome. Oh, that's great. Thanks, Jordan. He said, after a coworker had suggested that I check you out, this is what I'm saying. You guys are the best marketers. So whoever works with Jordan, thank you. Jordan says, I'm blown away by the amount of research that you do, and I'm so grateful that someone like you is out there to do this for people. I just started a recurring monthly donation to Congressional Dish. I don't have a lot of money, so it isn't much, but I wanted to at least give you something to show my sincere appreciation for your efforts. Please keep up the amazing work. Thank you, Jordan. And I mean this. If everybody contributed $5 a month, we'd be fine.
Yeah.
You know, so it's obviously the higher dollar amounts are really, really helpful. And I mean, I've done 196 episodes. So when I look at like the value of my work, when someone does, give me $200, it's a little over $1 per episode. It feels right. It feels fair. I'm not, it's the small dollars, but the small dollars matter, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And they're very much appreciated. So Jordan, first time listener, already contributing. Love it so much. Thank you. I love this too. We're getting another $4.20 a month. My people. This is a check that's coming from Marco Lanote in Castle Rock, Colorado. Didn't we just talk about Castle Rock? I feel like why were we talking about Castle Rock? Do we have another person from Castle Rock in 2 episodes in a row?
Possibly.
It's possible. But Marco does $4.20 a month, which is hilarious. So thank you, Marco. We have so many of those. We are also now getting $2 an episode on Patreon from Claire K. Thank you, Claire. Oh, this is a fun one. We're getting $3.26 a month from Dean Ethington. Woo!
Nice.
And Dean says, here is my monthly contribution. We need your podcast now more than ever. Thank you for all your hard and fantastic work. Well, thank you for supporting it. And we're now also getting $1 an episode from Michael J. Brown, Bill Cameron, and Michael Acree, all of those people on Patreon. And $1 an episode pretty much tells me that they're in it for the bonus episodes. And you know what? I'm into that.
That's
that
why
works
you did
for
it.
me. Yeah. And the golf swing free version. So, all right. Ready for another clip that had no reason to be in the show?
Of course.
Donald Trump is a man who ran for office to make his brand great, not to make our country great. He had no desire or intention to lead this nation, only to market himself and to build his wealth and power. Mr. Trump would often say, this campaign was going to be the greatest infomercial in political history. He never expected to win the primary. He never expected to win the general election. The campaign, for him, was always a marketing opportunity.
And actually, now that I heard that again, he basically admitted this. This is a clip that I played in the show. This is from May 11th, 2017. He's talking to Lester Holt.
And in fact, when I decided to just do it, I said to myself, I said, you know, this Russia thing with Trump and Russia is a made-up story. It's an excuse by the Democrats for having lost an election that they should have won.
Yeah, I think that one's the least surprising one. I think everyone kind of suspected that he was just in it to put his name out there because he did it. He's always sort of talked about it. And didn't he like put out an exploratory committee or something in 2012? He did.
I think
something.
so. Cohen took credit for it. That might be why you're thinking of that.
Yeah. There's talk of him.
But he was talking about it in the 80s. I remember him talking about it with like Oprah back when he could form, intelligent sentences. But yeah, I mean, this isn't surprising to me at all, in fact, because this was always one of my main problems with the storyline of Trump Russia, which I don't understand why a man who didn't seem to want to win would go to the lengths of conspiring with a foreign country to somehow take him. It just never made sense to me. If he was it would make more sense for someone like Hillary to do it, who's it's my turn to be president. That makes sense to me, to go to the lengths of, conspiring with another nation. In fact, we just watched Veep. It was this character is very clearly Hillary in the last season, and they conspired with China to basically
spoiler
rig
alert.
the election. Oh, please. It's a 5-second storyline, and who watches Veep anymore? But I don't think that is that really a spoiler?
No,
I don't think so either. But it is a storyline in there. And that's the type of person I could see doing something like that. But I remember in the campaign, Trump was building his brand. It just seemed so obvious. And it changed a little bit in the general direction, or in the general election.
Yeah, see, I think there's two different things. I don't think he minded just putting his name out there in the primary. And once he won the primary and it was just one-on-one, I think
that's when he wanted to win.
That's when he wanted to
win.
But
this shit started before that. Yeah, it's just that whole storyline never really made sense to me. And then when he won the election and Melania looked like she was terrified, and we find out that she was inconsolable. That's why they came out so late on the stage, because she couldn't stop crying. She was promised, we're not going to win. Hillary's got this in the bag. The whole country thought that Hillary had this in the bag. In fact, I was collecting. It's one of the reasons I have so many Hillary sound clips, because I was ready for Hillary. I didn't want Hillary, but I was ready. It was just okay, I know about this woman. I know what her game is. I know what's kind of I had an idea of what was coming after studying the Obama administration all those years. I knew, or felt like I knew, how to handle a Hillary presidency. And that's what was so shocking about that day for all of us. And it sounds including the Trump administration. All of us went oh, okay, well, this is not what was expected. And you could see it on their faces that night.
Yeah.
You know, they weren't really celebrating. They just all looked like deers in the headlights. So just to hear it confirmed by Michael Cohen, it just like solidifies what I think we all kind of guessed. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So that's why we clipped that one. And I guess I could have put this in the main show, but why? You know? This show was long enough as it was. Okay, so now let's get into our one-time contributions since the last episode. Oh, we have a decent list here. The largest contributor on this list, after Mike Coverdale, of course, is $150 on PayPal from Dennis Heather. And Dennis said, "Hi, Jennifer. I've been a listener for a few years, and I am finally getting off my butt to support you. I can only imagine the intensity of your research. You do a great job. I believe you're my best source to discover what the hell Congress is doing. You know, I do deep dives on what Congress is doing, but one of the things that I don't do well is give you guys the day-to-day, and I don't really know the day-to-day. So when it comes to that type of stuff, I actually recommend the District Sentinel. This is a podcast that I've been supporting for a long time. It's kind of the only advertising I do is on the District Sentinel, so I'll let you guys know that. But one of the reasons that I picked them is that they have really short podcasts every day, and they pay a lot of attention to Congress, more so than I think anybody else. And so if you just want to know what's going on, I mean, that's probably your best source that I know of for what's happening all the time. But yeah, I think I do an extraordinary job when it comes to deep diving whatever topic I'm interested in that 2-week period. Back to his note, he said, "I'm frustrated and sad that our elected representatives are so addicted to the power we have allowed them to have. But nowhere in mainstream media do we hear the unbiased truth about our elected people. So I'd love to listen to you even when you go off the rails and have your rants. It's awesome. So here's my contribution. I've been a golf playing crazy person for many years. Sadly, I injured my shoulder such that I can't play, and I'm not sure if I'll be able to return to it." Oh, that sucks.
That's lame.
"So I'm slowly selling all my golf things on eBay, and I am sending you the proceeds. As I sell more, I will donate more." That's cool. "In the meantime, I tell anyone who will listen to me to tune into Congressional Dish. Thank you for all your hard work, Dennis Heather." Thanks, Dennis. And I'm sorry you don't get to play the game. I mean, I think it's boring as all hell, but I know that Joe and his boys love it to the point that they get up at 5 o'clock in the morning to go play it. I mean, it's got to be fun for some people if you're willing to do that. We also got $100 on Venmo from Paul Woody, and Paul said he's a new listener. Love it so much. The enthusiasm is refreshing. Keep it up. Thank you, Paul. We also got $100 from Michael Stockman on PayPal, and he said, "Thanks for the bonus episode. Even though I'm not a patron, keep it up." And you, with your $100, convinced me that I should keep doing this, because it sounds like that's $100 that I would not have gotten had I not done that extra effort. And it was extra effort to set it all up and record it and put it together, although my editors put it together, but then I had to post it, and like, it is more work. So you basically paid for that bonus episode and encouraged me to do more. So Michael, you made a big difference. Thank you very much. Steve McMahon, one of my all-time favorites, gave us $55 on PayPal, and he said, "Thought you could use a boost for the IT person. Keep up the good work." I certainly can. And actually, we're about to have a staffing shakeup here on Congressional Dish. So I don't think the price point's going to change, but we're going to do some hiring here in the next couple months on Congressional Dish. So Steve, thanks for the help. We also got 5105 from Ryan McConnell on PayPal, who said, "Thank you for doing the work that you do." Thank you very much. Heidi Kepnes. Heidi has been supporting the show forever. This is Heidi, the one that did the art that we had hanging in our apartment where we lived with Ryan in East Boston.
Oh, yeah.
She's the one that works in Chelsea. So we haven't met in person yet, but I already consider her a friend. And she gave us $50 on Venmo and said, "For past and present, Yemen blew my mind. I had no idea we regime changed there too." That's Heidi. That's exactly how I felt about it. Keep up the good fight, Jen. Your work is so important. Thank you. Well, thank you for supporting me all these years. I can't wait to meet you in person. It's ridiculous that we haven't yet. We also got $40 on Zelle from Israel Disser, who says, "I'm a new listener. Thank you for the work you do." And so you guys, when I ask you for marketing help, when you do turn your friends onto the podcast, this is how it actually turns into financial support too. When amazing people like Israel and Jordan and Paul, we have so many new listeners on this list that are contributing to the show already, which I wasn't feeling great when I started these thank yous, but I'm feeling so much better now. So thank you, Israel. I love having you on the team. Thanks for giving the show a chance and for supporting it so quickly. We also got a check for $38.10 from Tom Hall of Colorado Springs, Colorado. And his email said, "Hi, Jen. I've sent you a $38.10 tip for episodes 190, A Coup for Capitalism." That was the one about Venezuela. And Congressional Dish 191, where you responded to an unnamed podcaster's letter. Yeah. That was the Elliot Abrams episode. Yeah. And that podcaster challenged me about, that was the guy that was basically, if I remember correctly, saying that I was defending Maduro. Yeah. Back to his note, he said, "I genuinely agree with the letter's author. Can you send me the name of his or her podcast?" Let me think about that, because I kept that anonymous for a reason. Let me think about that. Back to the note, the tyranny of the majority, aka democracy, is nothing new. Humanity has struggled against tyranny for most of our history. The USA representative republic is as close as we've come to a free society, but capitalism remains an unknown ideal. I agree with your view that the cronyism in the world today is abhorrent. This is why we must, and then he gives me a website, www.separatestateandtheeconomy.com. The information you organize and provide in your podcast is invaluable. Thanks, and keep it up, Tom Hall. I don't think you can separate state and the economy. I don't think that's possible. I think you need the state to regulate the economy. Because if you don't, we already know what happens. The big businesses buy up all the little businesses and you end up with monopolies. That's exactly what's happening. That's what happens when you free the economy, when you free the market to do whatever the hell it feels like. That's one of the biggest problems we're having in this world. We have a few companies that control things all over the globe. And I don't think that this has been good for anyone. For example, like if we allow Amazon to take over all commerce, so it's like we get all our books and all our clothes and all of our furniture and everything from Amazon, then that's obviously going to have so much power over the workers. Because if you work in any of those industries, but you don't work for Amazon, then you don't have a job. So it's like you have to do whatever they require of you because you have nowhere else to go. As for customers, I mean, the minute they hit that kind of level, they would be able to charge whatever they want because those are our only options. We're already seeing this in healthcare. Here's another good example, cable companies. Where we're at right now, we have one choice for cable, and it's Comcast. And we are getting absolutely screwed on cable and internet. But we have nowhere else to go. And so the only power in this world that is big enough and strong enough to ensure that there's competition is the state, is the government. And so the question that we should be asking ourselves is, where's the appropriate line? You know, like what should the government be doing and what should they allow, you know, what happens in the market? But you can't separate the state and the economy. That's not how it works, especially where the entire world now is kind of one economy, or at least that's what they're attempting to do. But we have countries that trade with other countries. You have to have rules, and who makes rules and who enforces rules on a societal level? The government. So how do you separate the two, like in a practical way?
Yeah, I don't know. I agree with you completely. I think there has to be some rules, but I think everybody, or at least most people, would agree that like there has to be some regulation, but you don't want too much. Like, yeah, having some regulation creates inefficiencies, but it's worth it so that you don't have, you know, like you said, like runaway monopolies. At some point, you have to sacrifice.
Well, you can't let businesses do whatever they want.
Yeah,
you just can't. I mean, children's toys, you need to make sure that there's not lead in the paint because children eat everything. You know, there's just like certain rules that need to be put in place. And what I find in doing this work is that the people that are pushing the idea that this, in Congress anyway, that the government and businesses should be completely separate. The government should have no role in the economy, this thing that's labeled as free market. The people that push this tend to be the owners of businesses because they don't want any rules. Yeah. Like, of course not. But then they're in Congress, and then you find, you know, one of the big themes right now, and I'm going to have to do an episode on it because I think that if anything gets done in this Congress, it's going to be something about the cost of prescription drugs. And if you go by free market theory, these companies should be able to charge whatever they want. The government shouldn't intervene in the market. But what we're finding is that these companies are price gouging because they can. We allow them to have these patents that allow them to hold on to drugs that they didn't exactly pay to develop. A lot of it came from the government to begin with, but people are getting gouged and people are dying because of it. And so we're going to have to intervene using our government in that business, in that industry, because they're hurting their customers for profit. And it's far more complicated than that. There's a bunch of different players, and that's something that I'm going to have to study. But the point is, it's dangerous to let businesses do whatever they want. It's dangerous not to regulate businesses. And there's only one power that can regulate businesses that are not only in every state in our country, but are international. And that's governments, whether it's a single government or governments banding together through like the World Trade Organization. And I think I've said this before, but I'm not against the World Trade Organization existing, but I'm against the way that they've written the rules. You know, it's been written by these business leaders. And what we're finding is that the world trade system is overthrowing countries that don't let multinationals in. Like, that's not what it should be, but we should have rules. We need rules. So I actually, I haven't seen this website, Separate State and the Economy, but just the idea behind that name is just, I can't support that. So I don't know. But Tom, let's talk more about this. I'm always down to have this conversation because I think this is the conversation that we need to have. So thank you for supporting the podcast, and I hope to hear from you again. We also on Venmo got $25 from D. Calez, who said, great job. Keep it up. Thank you very much. Dow Crosby is back, $25 on PayPal. And Dow said, love the show. It's been years since I've donated. Last time was in Bitcoin. So I'd figure I'd toss you a couple of dollars. Keep up the good work. Thanks, Dow. Great to see your name again. We also got $25 on Venmo from Warren Vasquez, and he says that this $25 is for the Golf Channel for Joe.
Yes, thank you, Warren.
Warren, what did you do to me? I thought you liked me, Warren. No,
Warren's a good man.
Golf on in my house. Well, you know what? Here's the thing. You don't know the password to our cable.
We already have the Golf Channel. Maybe I shouldn't tell
We
Laura
do?
that. Yeah, because you have like the super mega package for C-SPAN 3.
Which is it's still infuriating that I have to pay that much money for so many channels. I don't want like the Golf Channel
but
just to have access to C-SPAN 3.
I get a say, don't I?
Sort of, but the only reason that we have the cable at all is because I need the C-SPANs live. Like, that's it. So it's not that you don't have a say, but I think both of us would cut this cord so fast if we didn't need the C-SPANs. Like, we don't need it. We only watch TV for sports, really.
Yeah, live TV is basically sports, which...
Now we have sports packages. Like, who was it? Oh, I think it was Lex that was telling me that she, for $40, has all the sports through like YouTube or something. So she cut the cable, and so they pay that. And then we could get a satellite dish for, local news. And that's the thing about local news. I don't watch it, but in case of emergencies, I want access to it.
It's not even a satellite dish. You can get antennas for like less than $100.
Yeah. But we would cut the cord. It's just C-SPAN.
We had one
C-SPAN is provided by cable, so we need cable to access it. It's
we
the
had
most
that
annoying thing in the world.
in Oakland. Remember that?
Well, we tried, but we didn't. That's the thing. Like,
we were
you
facing the wrong way.
We were facing the wrong direction. So you say like, oh, it costs $100, but if you don't face the right direction,
there's options. Is all I'm saying.
I know there's options, but not for getting C-SPAN live on the television. So that's the only reason we have cable. If you wanted the fucking Golf Channel, I would get it for you, but it's
we
have
that
enough
covered
of that
thanks
on
to
TV
Warren.
as it is.
Well, we have the Golf Channel covered thanks to Warren.
Well, thank you, Warren. I don't really mean that. I appreciate the $25, but not the giving me more golf.
He earmarked it. We have to honor his wishes.
Okay. Well, it does help with this month's cable bill so that you can watch this super boring shit all day. We also got $20 on Venmo from Tyler BD, who said, loved the new Yemen episode. A good reminder that I'm less informed than I thought I was. Dude, me too. I had no idea. Back to note a couple of other things. One, David Cicilline represents Rhode Island, not New Jersey. Why did I think yeah, you know what? I knew that. I don't know why I said that. Thanks for pointing that out. He said, I know it doesn't really matter. Yes, it does. But as a Rhode Islander, I get excited when Rhode Island might be said on the podcast. Well, there was another, I think it was Jack Reed from Rhode Island was in this episode. So that should make you excited. But yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, sometimes I say the wrong things and I don't know why. Number 2, I do love the thank yous. Nobody tells me they like the thank yous. Yeah, that's why I'm back to reading all the notes and letting them go as long as I want to, because ever since I said that, I'm getting more and more people saying I love the thank yous. So, all right. Number 3, I have also had the experience where I can't remember what dingleberries are actually called. And so I've found myself saying, I don't know what they're actually called, but Jennifer Briney from the best podcast ever called Congressional Dish calls them dingleberries. I love that. Anyhow, as always, thank you, thank you, thank you. Hope this helps a bit with the April dropouts. It does. I don't know. I mean, obviously we're only halfway through May. I don't know if we're going to recover here, but yeah, thank you for stepping up and helping out. Danny Trester, a longtime fan or friend of the podcast, gave us $20 on Venmo. Ugh, I'm losing my ability to speak. And she said, at the end of the last episode, you described your excitement in getting to read the Mueller report. Just goes to show your passion for how thrilled you were to dive in. Not many people have that. Keep on kicking ass. Well, thank you, Danny. And honestly, I did love reading it. This week was a real bitch. I mean, I think I did multiple 12-hour days and I'm exhausted and I've had to do more work than I usually do for reasons I won't explain right now. But yeah, I enjoyed doing this episode. I think I said this at the beginning of the podcast, but I'm a little afraid of the backlash because this is one topic. Anytime you talk about anything related to the Mueller report or Russiagate or Trump in general, people just get so crazy. So I'm really afraid of next week, to be honest with you, but it's my job to deal with this shit, I guess. So here it comes. But thanks, Danny. We also got $20 on Venmo from Kevin Mays, who said you do amazing work. Thank you. Well, thank you for supporting me. We also got $20 on Venmo from Mike Cretella, who said this is for Yemen and CFATs. Oh, some money for the CFATs episode. Thank you very much. We also got $20 on PayPal from Aaron Hahn, who said, May the 4th be with you. I'm surprised there's only been one of those. Thanks, Aaron. We got $20 on Venmo from Michael Gompertz, who said, hi, I love your podcast. I think I found it through the tinfoil hat or ripple effect. Keep up the good work. I appreciate what you do, from a fellow Bostonian. Oh, I remember this guy. Then we went back and forth on Venmo about Boston sports, as we do. But yeah, thanks, Michael. And the Bruins are still in it. Can't believe it. I can't believe it because I wasn't paying any attention, but go Bruins. I love it. And actually, now that the Bruins have gone this far, I might actually watch a game or two. We also got $19 on Venmo from Emily Acipiter. And this is $3 for each episode, 192, 193, 195, plus $10 for 194. And so, she broke it down. So she said for Congressional Dish 192, playing catch up today on episodes I haven't paid for yet. For Congressional Dish 193, this episode was great and makes me so mad at the same time. Oh, this was the CFATs episode. And she says, now I'm pissed that I could be living near a future explosion and have no way to know. I know, girl. That scared me too. She said for 194, measles, one of my favorite episodes so far. Have shared with several people, incredibly topical and balanced. Thank you for helping put consumable information into the world. And I'm still getting backlash on that episode. It's insane. People being like, oh, you just trust the CDC. And it's like, no, I looked into the people that were in the hearing. They're doctors. They've never worked in the pharmaceutical company. I don't know how to deal with this. I really all I've told everyone that has gotten mad at me is that if you can give me information and you can prove that the measles vaccine is a bigger risk than getting the measles, I will retract everything I said. And I will do it at the beginning of whatever episode you can prove that to me on. And I'll even take down the episode if I have to. But you're going to have a real hard time proving that, because that was my final conclusion. I wasn't talking about all vaccines. I was talking about measles. And the vaccine is less of a risk than getting the fucking measles. I don't know what else to tell people. And so the fact that these emails are still coming in is making me insane. And so to hear that someone liked the episode, it really does help me to not lose my mind. So thank you, Emily. And then for 195, this was the Yemen episode. She said, I feel like I know nothing about our foreign policies. Thank you for the insight into the U.S. and Yemen. You're very welcome. And I feel like I now at this point need to do an episode for every country in the world, because every time I look into a country and our relationship with it, I find out things that are just mind blowing that I feel like should be breaking news. And it bothers me so much that they're not. So like the fact that we helped overthrow Yemen, we didn't know. didn't know. So, yeah, thanks, Emily. And I love that you broke it down by episode. And yeah, that's super cool. Thank you. We also got $15 on Venmo from Chrissa Morrison, who said, thank you for the Venezuela Part 2, Yemen, and the chemical regulations episode. Thank you very much. And thanks for letting me know which ones you like the most. It really does help me when I'm picking topics to know which ones you guys appreciated. We also got a $10 bonus check from Irvin Wells of Madison, Wisconsin. And this is on top of his Patreon subscription. He said, thanks for your important work. This is a bonus. Thank you very much. Oh, our good friend Robert Perez gave us a $10 check, and the memo said measles. Thanks, Robert. Glad you liked the episode. We also got $10 from Colton Seals of Riverview, Florida. Thank you, Colton. We also got $10 on Venmo from Michelle Molina. Thank you, Michelle. I know your name for sure. We also got $10 on PayPal from James Donaldson. Thank you, James. We got $10 on Zelle from Annette Martinez. Thanks, Annette. We got $10 on Zelle from Nathan Pickney, who said, thank you for the podcast, just doing what I can. And it is very much appreciated. We got a $5 check from Tracy Marshu, and Lauren says, this is an extra thank you for the $5 donation made in March, but was missed on the thank you list for Congressional Dish 193. So I'm sorry we missed this, but we very much appreciate your contribution. So thank you. We also got a $5 Venmo from Billy Coffin, who said, tax season is a golf swing. Yes, it is. We also got $4 on Venmo from Wesley Wright, who said, this is for Yemen. Thank you very much. We got $3 on Venmo from Christian Stafford, who said, episode 195, which was the Yemen one. Thanks for your work. I'm an unemployed recent grad, so I'm giving what little I can. Every tiny bit helps. So thank you, Christian. And last, we got $2 on Venmo from Leanne Moreau, who said, I'm poor, but I value your research. Keep dishing. I'm going to Venmo you for every episode I listen to, and it will be small, so small, but hopefully it helps just a little bit. It definitely does. So yes, thank you for doing that. And the people that do that contribute for the episodes and tell me which episodes they like I truly enjoy reading those because it makes me feel like I'm getting paid for those episodes. Like the person that, what's her name? Emily, over the course, and it was cool too, because it was like every couple of hours, it was like, ding, $3, ding, $3, ding, $3. It was like, and she was telling me that this was the episode I just listened to. Like she clearly binged over the course of a couple of days. And I like that. So yeah, as long as you're contributing in whatever amount feels right to you, that works for me. The only people that hurt me are the ones that contribute zero, and especially the ones that contribute zero and then give me shit. Like those are the people where I'm like, I don't need you in my life. But the rest of you, I adore you all, and I couldn't keep this up without you. Oh, and that reminds me of, we have one more person, an anonymous friend who contributed $1 worth of Litecoin. So cryptocurrencies are in the mix. Joe Briney, are you ready for the last clip?
Absolutely.
This one's from Trump. And this was during an interview with Ainsley Earhardt on Fox and Friends. Surprise, surprise.
What grade do you give yourself so far?
So I give myself an A+.
Isn't that amazing?
It's just like the timing is so good because you know exactly what he's going to say, and he just kind of like waits a minute.
I didn't. When I saw the question, when I was watching that one live, I saw, what grade do you give yourself? And I was like, I'm sure he's going to give himself an A, but maybe he'll pretend to be humble and be like A-.
No, what the hell's the matter with you?
A+.
Of course, he's going to say A+ the whole way. I'm surprised he didn't say like A+++ and make up some bullshit grade that was even better.
Like the grades that we would find if we were able to go to his college.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, I think that last one, I need to clean up the sound quality of it, but that might have to be a thing that comes up. In fact, maybe we need like a donation amount that every time you like give us this amount, then we just automatically play the A+ clip, because that might be one of my favorite sound clips of all time. I give myself an A+.
Of course he does.
Of course he does. All right. So that's it for the thank yous for this week. Pray for me. The backlash that's going to come from this episode. Yeah. And honestly, if you guys have feedback, I do enjoy feedback, but make it constructive. If there's information you want to add or something you think I don't know, a good way to tell me is to be nice. yeah, I'm terrified of this upcoming week, but I do appreciate your support. I could use your support for sure. But yeah, thanks to everyone who already has a Patreon and monthly subscribers and just everyone who's bought stuff on the Congressional Dish store and is sporting Congressional Dish out in the world. Like I said, I would not still be doing this if it wasn't for you guys. And that's no bullshit. So from Joe and I, thank you very much. And I'd also like to thank Karen. Why did I start with Karen? I'd like to thank Daryl, Karen, Mike, and Carrie. Although I really should order this if I'm doing it correctly. I'd like to thank Mike, Daryl, Karen, and Carrie at Pro Podcast Solutions, because Mike's our guy and he is the fucking best. And Pro Podcast Solutions, like, it's no joke, you guys. I've been working with them for so many years now that I've lost track. And I am so happy with everything about our working relationship. I mean, it's the one company I've hired that I've just had no problems with, and they make my life so easy. And so if you are a podcaster and you're looking for editing, Pro Podcast Solutions, it's owned by Daryl Darnell. Seriously, it's the best decision I've ever made, was hiring Daryl and Mike and Karen and Carrie. So thank you, Pro Podcast Solutions. I'd also like to thank Brian. His company is Only Child Imaginations, but he's the one that does the cover art for every episode and operates the Congressional Dish store. I love working with Brian. He started as a volunteer and he's one of the people I depend on. And I don't even have to question it. He always gets his shit done. And yeah, I love you too, Brian. I also love my little baby sister, Lauren, who she's so good at her job. So thank you, Lauren. And thank you, Dad, for our monthly call, well, they're becoming monthly lately since we're both just really flaky. But yeah, Dad keeps me in check and I appreciate it and does the accounting and all that jazz. And thank you, Joe, for
You're
doing
welcome.
The thank yous and the Cohen episode, and for putting up with my crazy and for dealing with the fact that I have not been around all week again.
But at least I have the golf channel.
Yeah, you do have the golf channel, even if you don't have a wife sometimes. and I have to warn you, for this upcoming episode, like, I'm working on a shorter time scale. So it's like, I have a similar week coming up next week. Like, so just get ready.
All right.
Cue up your golf, because I'll be doing some late nights. But I'm really excited about this because I'm going to learn about Manafort and Ukraine, and he worked for the president that we overthrew. So like, what went on? And we have the indictments. And so what I've learned is that the indictments are prosecutors that tell you what they think happened. But this guy's already been convicted of shit. So yeah, I'm actually super excited to dive into those. But yeah, thank you all. And I will be back with the rest of the Mueller report stuff by the end of May. Thanks so much. Talk to you soon. Bye.
We're surrounded now by liars coming at us through our TV screens.
We don't have a domestic spying program.
They're content to fight in black and white despite the many in-betweens. We got a president who plays with the facts. And then he waves a flag to cover his tracks. As if a lie is alright, in the end he'll justify the means. Now we are so damn tired of being lied to.
The polar ice caps aren't going away.
We don't think we can deny it anymore. You can stick to your story if you think it lies. But we're not keeping quiet anymore. We are so damn tired of being lied to.
Government jobs consume the profits of the private sector.
We don't think we can deny it anymore. You can stick to your story if you think it flies. But we're not keeping quiet anymore. Now we're not keeping quiet.
These bills represent